Everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first we have some announcements. First is a budget workshop is scheduled for Monday, March 2nd. Do we know who that's going to be, Larry? It's an overview. And then we also have a budget workshop on Wednesday, March 11th, which is going to be the Recreation and Parks Department as well as the Building Department. The only other announcements I have are checks over $25,000, which one was certiorari to general fund, which was $75,050.86, and then there was another check over $25,000 for Tom Lucci Excavating, which were multiple village projects. Some of it, about $25,000, came from the general fund, and the other $15,000 from the water fund. There's a total of $40,075. Anyone else have any announcements?
Not yet.
I believe all of the correspondence apply to the public hearing, so I'm just going to hold over that until we get to the public hearing. Then I will open it up for public comment or anything not on the agenda.
Can I ask about huge, like, life-eating potholes on the top of Riverview Road? Has anybody brought that to anyone's attention?
No.
Okay. If somebody drives up there, they'll see them right away.
I know there's one on the bottom that
There's more on.
okay.
I can email.
Yeah, Greg.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the phone.
It was a large pothole in the top of Riverview Road.
Thank you.
Any other?
I do have something. Do you remember about 8 years ago, the municipality, the companies like Con Ed and the telephone company did a certiorari? They attacked.
You pass the mic there.
That's right. Hi, Bill Thompson. A number, I don't know how many years ago, it was 8 or 10 years ago, a lot of the utilities did a certiorari, and they knocked the taxes down throughout the county. That was one of the beginnings of when our tax bases start to go down. I'm wondering if there's any action with all this Con Ed gas pipe going in, if there's an action to get the utilities to pay more real estate tax.
We can check with the town assessor, yeah, that we don't do assessing here anymore.
Yeah.
So the town assessor is responsible.
Boy, I'd like to see them pay.
Okay. We'll check on that.
I don't think anyone would disagree with you. So.
Yeah, just didn't know whether it was on the radar.
Yeah.
Any other? Otherwise, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Just had the minutes. If anyone had any questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Thanks, Mark. Next up is a continuation of the public hearing, consider local law amending the zoning code to permit parking structures in existing buildings in the business district. I will continue with that. It's already open. I'm going to reopen it. So, did you want to give any updates or anything?
Well, there's just one small change to it, and that is, just to repeat the use, it says in the business district, the use is allowed in buildings already in existed on January 1st, 2020, parking structures provided that the following additional requirements are met. The building in which the parking structure is located does not border either Main Street or North Astor. And then this was added, no rooftop parking is permitted. I think that was the intention, that it had to be within the building, but when this was reviewed by the planning board, they suggested that it specify no rooftop parking, so that was added. But substantively, it's not a change, but the language is in there. And then the parking structure is subject to site development plan review. And then the other changes in there just relate to the same thing, some other parts of the code, but all that was in there last year.
So when you say site development plan review, they'd be looking at noise, traffic, pollution, and all the other kinds of stuff that any site project would normally get reviewed for.
Yeah, and traffic circulation, both on the site and between the site and the streets feeding into it. And the other issues that might be relevant, but, yeah, and the same site development plan review you would do on anything.
Anyone on the board have any comments at this time, or should we open up to the public?
I guess my only comment was, I know there had been a suggestion from one member of, I guess, of the planning board about whether or not this should be a special permit, but I think we all came to agree, I just want to kind of historically footnote it, that we all came to agree that no one would be investing the kinds of capital required to develop a parking, without kind of a long-term existence being guaranteed for that structure's use. So a special permit where it might go away in 5 years just seemed kind of absurd on the face of it.
It's
And-
also, on the special permit thing, it's also worth knowing, in the business district, almost none of the uses are special permit. Just the 2 new ones we added about it, the active reuse store buildings or bed and breakfast, but otherwise the uses are as of right, so it would,
Yes, doesn't make that much sense.
And for anyone hearing about this for the first time, there's only really 2 buildings that this would be kind of, feasible in. Especially without
Especially now
with the
that
rooftop piece,
parking
making
clarified,
it very
yeah.
clarified.
There was also discussion about how noise regulations and construction
And light.
apply to this other project in terms of beginning hours in the morning, afternoon hours, holidays, so that that was clarified for some nearby residents.
Those will open it up to the public. Yeah, you just made it, we're talking about your application.
Anyone has anything to say about it?
I'll start.
Sure.
Hi, I've been, I guess, to 2 or so prior of the zoning ones, so some people on the board may already know my position. My name is Audrey Feinberg. I live at 39 Circle Drive, but my driveway and how I get into my house is on Strawberry Lane.
This is actually,
Oh, this is only on parking?
Sorry.
Parking.
I'm saying,
it's okay. You can still go
it's
first.
hard to hear you.
No worries.
Yes.
You can go
Everybody
first.
speak up.
I don't eat first, I just want to know when this is going.
Yeah, since you live in the neighborhood, does anyone have any comments or questions? I don't.
We just came to see what the latest and greatest was.
Okay. Actually, do you mind giving like the 2-second version of what we changed? There's not that many changes. Basically, there was I think the one big change, which actually isn't really a change, is that it specifies no rooftop parking, which was, we always kind of thought that that was implied, but the planning board asked us to make it specific, so I think that's the biggest change. That eliminates something like the post office from really being a site that could ever have this happen, and that was a place that someone was talking about. But other than that, I think it's pretty much the same, except for some language cleanup.
No, it wasn't even any, that's the only change.
Okay. Give me a second. Okay.
I think
Well, I'll make
everyone's here.
a motion to close the public hearing. If I have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Whereas a public hearing on an amendment of the zoning code to permit parking structures in existing buildings in the business district, but not in buildings bordering Main Street and North Astor Street, and was held on February 3rd, 2020 and February 20th, 2020. And whereas the proposed amendment is an unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and whereas the Board of Trustees has reviewed the environmental assessment form and determined that the amendment would result in no adverse environmental impacts, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees issues a negative declaration to adopt a local law amending the zoning code to permit parking structures in existing buildings in the business district. I'll make the motion. I have a second. All in favor? And now, Audrey, we're going to continue the public hearing to consider local law amending the zoning code to create the North Broadway mixed-use district.
Yes, I present first.
Please.
All right.
The board's worked hard to sort of put limits on this, but I stand here opposed to changing the property to commercial from residential, particularly the Maxon property. It's across the street from a whole row of houses, it's a residential neighborhood, and any commercial use is going to be more than what we have with Maxon now, where there's absolutely nobody there evenings and weekends whatsoever, where there's a slight bump in traffic at 9 and 5. This building. So I don't know who's in favor of this, but residents prefer a residential neighborhood. We bought our house more than 20 years ago. It was a residential neighborhood with one non-conforming use, and now some of the uses that would be allowed there, albeit smaller, because you've done some work to put some restrictions on it, but still it includes lots of weekend noise, traffic, commercial uses, boutique hotels, assisted living. There are many uses that are allowed under the current zoning proposal, and frankly, I don't like any of them. We've talked a lot about the traffic on Strawberry Lane, which is a separate issue that can be solved if the ingress and egress is required from Broadway, but as I understand it, that's not a done deal and may not be completely feasible. But right now, the Maxon property is entered from Strawberry Lane, which really can't handle the cars that are on it now. It's a non-conforming road. The village doesn't do the snow removal on it. We have problems with people with the ice that's on it in the winter. Luckily, it's been a non-snowy winter, so it's been less of an issue. And people need, people that don't have, say, four-wheel drive vehicles will make the turn onto Broadway and gun it to make it up that hill without stalling in snow. It's really not a safe situation. So I don't know how you can even think about adding traffic to that road with a new commercial use.
Thanks. I think I wanted to let Audrey go, but I think we're going to I wanted to do a little bit of an introduction, but I knew you were anxious to go. So I do think that, I think some of the history of this is important. This started all the way back when we did the comprehensive plan. We started with a group of residents that were called the North Broadway. It wasn't called the North Broadway.
Actually, it was Broadway in total, actually.
It was the Broadway corridor group. There were people that lived directly across the street from there. I think there was 12 people altogether on it,
Maybe a little less.
maybe 10 people on it, including the neighbor directly across the street. I think there's 2 people that lived right in the neighborhood. That came up with recommendations. I think what the overriding view was, they liked when you come into Irvington, it's Irvington because there's the open area there with the open lawn, and you just knew you were no longer in Tarrytown. It was now Irvington, and there's that area that looked like that for 50 years at least. What we realized is that nothing there now is per the current zoning. So the goal was to preserve what is there now. And then we try to get as much input as we could. So that was like the first part. They basically wrote a recommendation, went to the comprehensive plan, we adopted the comprehensive plan. Then from that, we tried to enact the things in the comprehensive plan, and this is one of them. I think there's probably half a dozen to a dozen things from the comprehensive plan that required legislation. This is one of them. This was definitely one of the heavier lifts. We knew it was a large change, so we wanted to have as much input from residents, neighbors, property owners, professional staff, et cetera. So we had our first public hearing back on June 3rd. A lot of people were worried we were going to rush it through and get it done over the summer when no one was around. I promised everyone we'd wait until September. I think we counted there were 9 public hearings, not including the work sessions, which we actually, because it was again such an important issue, we let people speak if they wanted to speak during the work sessions. So there was at least a dozen, I think, opportunities for people to speak about this. We're still in no rush to get this done. We want to get this as correct as possible. We're listening. It's changed a lot since we started. We sized down things. I mean, some of it was like, we just had to get, you have to start with a law. So you have to get something on paper. And then we've kind of tweaked it. We've tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it. We've had some input from the property owners. I think a surprise. Really only one property owner has given us much input at all. I think that's where we are. Again, we're in no rush. I actually am inclined, because this is a holiday week where people are away, to at least hold it over until March 2nd. The end of tax season seems like a kind of as a CPA myself, it seems like an odd time to hold it over to, but, another couple weeks if people need more information. Frankly, the public hearings had come to a trickle. We hadn't gotten much new information. We had a lot of the same information. One thing I like to point out is that for 50 years, this hasn't been, at least 50 years, it hasn't been residential. It was zoned that way. It was under a whole bunch of special permits, and some of them were kind of, they were definitely of their time, let's put it that way. It wasn't how we would do it today. Frankly, I think the people that were on those committees of this board all felt that use of, we don't have a lot of large open space in Irvington, so having that not be just single-family homes, that, we did have a proposal once to subdivide the big White House, the Carafiello property as we call it, and it looked awful. It looked like a big ski hill, because they had to slice it up and dice it up. That was really, I think, when we were galvanized and said,
I think it was 5.
It was 5
4 or
large
5
homes,
floors?
6 homes.
6.
And to get the access, it's very steep and hilly. It changed the entire look of the area. And that was really, I think, the impetus of a lot of it was, we didn't think that residential was necessarily the best use for that property. We also have such a small amount of potential commercial space in Irvington that it was important. I think other things like affordable housing and things like that we always talk about. If this is just single-family homes, there's no chance of ever having any affordable housing. There's no chance of diversifying against, if this was single-family homes, we'd probably have several $2.5 million, $4 million homes built, which we know those are what they're not selling right now. So to us, this was an important discussion to have. This is where we came out. This is where the resident group that made recommendations came out. We've been trying to get that balance between the two. It does allow for multifamily housing, which is the use immediately to the north. So to me, again, it isn't really out of character when this has been commercial for all these years, and the next property to the north is multifamily as well. So.
Right, I brought the part of the comprehensive plan with me. I think it might be helpful to read it.
Yeah, I think that would be
because I think it's actually been probably a long time since the board read it. But I won't read the whole thing, it's 2 pages. But the other one thing you mentioned about the group, but there was also a survey done. And there was actually a quite robust response on this one. And virtually all of the respondents to the survey agreed that the Broadway corridor should remain as it is developed now. That is, with a mix of residential, commercial, and institutional uses, and with the large properties retaining their deep setbacks and open landscapes. This is reading from the Compton Road, but by this time the Broadway corridor had been shrunk just to that area, because the only open properties were this and Columbia, and they thought Columbia was, that was dealt with. And this was the action plan. I'm going to read it from the comp plan update, and which is what the board implemented. In order to maintain the properties on the northeast portion of the Broadway corridor roughly as they are used now, a new zoning district should be created for them, perhaps multifamily, commercial, institutional. Permitted uses that the comp plan committee came up with were multifamily, residential, including single-family attached but clustered in order to maximize open space, assisted living facilities of a fixed density, office, research and design, art galleries, municipal uses, museums, schools, private clubs, boutique hotels, bed and breakfasts, and restaurants. Permitted uses should not include retail. Medical offices or facilities should be allowed only for medical uses that would not negatively impact area traffic. The zoning should include incentives for preserving historic structures, providing affordable housing, and furnishing other public amenities. these uses should all be special permit uses. It was like, matches the recommendation almost exactly. The other thing, the survey did also ask people for ideas of uses, but it wasn't like, the uses weren't there, so there wasn't a percentage that people gave, and these were the uses. There wasn't, there wasn't a majority on any particular use, but these were the uses suggested, and then the comp plan committee looked at which ones seemed reasonable and came up with this. Okay, John, just to expand a little bit on what Brian said, I think it's helpful to actually read the document.
Great. And then, before we open it up for more public comment, I actually only had, after all this time, I think I still had one change, and it was a conversation I had with a resident. Talking about senior living facilities, the one issue that we, keep coming up on is the drain or potential drain on emergency services, which I think is a real issue, and it's not going to be easy to fix necessarily. But to ensure that it is prominently featured, I actually would propose adding something to the actual code under permitted uses, 224-47-8, under C, where we have minimum lot size, the combined number of beds shall not exceed 150. Something, I'll let you work on the exact wording, because you're much better than I am, but something about mitigating any potential, drain on EMS to the satisfaction of, I don't know what that would be, the consultant that the village has or something that would, and to me, they would basically have to pay to have EMS.
EMS only, or is fire also an issue?
Actually,
In terms of
I
false
think
alarms.
it's mostly it's mostly EMS draw. That's what I've heard from other municipalities.
Look, actually, I think we had something to that effect in the zoning that was proposed for Bright,
Yeah.
something about that. Yeah, but that's easy.
But I just think we should have that in there, so.
I don't think it's I think it's a good thing to clarify. Hope that should come up.
It should come up anyway,
It
but I
would
just
come
want
up
it
in
to be.
secret review, but
I want it to be
it's
top of
spelled out.
mind.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying it's not a huge change. I don't think it requires renoticing and everything.
Yeah, because if it happens in 20 years and then maybe it's not top
Yeah.
of mind, it's just to put that in writing. So that was the one change I had after all this time, to actually put it in there. I mean, we talked about it, but we just didn't put it in the code. I don't know if the board has any other comments, questions, concerns.
Maybe just to remind people of the date when we were doing the comp plan review. This was not so long ago, and it was, when did we finish the?
Beginning of 2008.
Yeah, right.
Beginning of 2018.
And the groups that were formed were simply volunteers from the community that said, I want to help out with this review. So some chose one group and others, and some kind of just randomly were placed in that. And there were, I think, I wasn't part of that one, but there must have been, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 or 7 meetings of that working group to come up with what Mary Ann read. So just as a historic piece of
Well,
where
they
this
came up
came
with the
from.
recommendation, but then the whole comp plan committee.
Then
had to
looked beyond that,
consider it.
yes.
And this actually came from the comp plan committee, which you took their recommendations. It was this board and the chairperson of the zoning board and the chairperson of the planning board.
And ARB.
And the ARB.
And actually, the working groups met in 2017, and the plan was adopted in 18,
Right.
just to...
I would also add that this board has been, I think, exceptional in listening and in making changes to this law. A number of the comments I've read in recent letters sent to the board, talk about traffic effects, talk about lighting effects. We've included all of these things into this law in terms of defining fairly strictly what traffic effects there are. In order to even be issued the TPS, the special permit, as well as lighting. And a number of things have been changed because of responses from the community. Strawberry Lane, the construction cannot be done, permit will not be, a special permit could not be issued on a facility unless Strawberry Lane is improved to the point that it can be used. So we've listened to the Strawberry Lane residents, we've listened to a lot of other residents and made a lot of changes that I think have already been included in this law. And I'd be curious if there are other comments, as opposed to simply, extending this for 3 more months. Specific questions and comments that we can deal with and we can answer.
Anybody else on the board?
Just following up what Larry said, comments relating to what's before us now, not 6 iterations ago, not the first things we were considering, not what we were talking about in 2018. But again, this has gone through numbers of revisions. And what we were trying to do was, with a great deal of input over a long period of time, try to tee this up so that we would have the best range of uses. Because here's what is true. It is not going to stay the way it is now for the next 100 years. We have to be prepared for the fact that there are going to be changes, that people want to sell, people want other things to be doing on their property. And that's why we're here. We're continue to be interested in what people have to say, but we have to figure out what's the best plan for the village.
And just to add to that a little bit, what we wanted to prevent was us being reactive to developers coming in and asking for zoning changes. A lot of people say, yeah, you can just say no to them. We could, but is that in the best interest of residents when there's a potential use that could be a viable use? We don't want those buildings to go derelict and not be worth anything. We want them to be a thriving part of our community and provide jobs and all that kind of stuff. Yes, traffic is a huge issue there already, but to have anything go in there, if you read what's in the law now, we didn't just say you can have a minimum amount of traffic impacts. We actually put in a measurable amount that's going to be very difficult to reach under a lot of proposals. So I think letting any potential developer come in and know that up front is what we were trying to do as well. So we're not responding to a plan the way we had twice before. Because now if someone comes in and says, I want to put something in there that isn't in here, we can say, we spent 3 years working on this rezoning. So no, sorry, it's not in there. And that's, that was another big part of it, which is kind of what you're saying.
And just one of the previous discussions, the fact that there's a list of permitted uses does not mean we're going to have one each. Sometimes I think people think, oh my God, there's going to be an assisted living facility and a bed and breakfast and a restaurant. There's only but so much property, and these are permitted uses. It doesn't mean they're all going to open up tomorrow, or that there would be room for all of them. There will be.
Right, it doesn't mean that every property can house all of these permitted uses.
Okay, should we open it up?
And there's a planning board for any particular idea that comes forward. Anyway, go ahead.
Could you just clarify the big white building, number 90? Is that the span of lawn that we're keeping? Some of them made a lot of my questions.
I think, and how much?
They said
250 foot setback required
I
under
think that's
this.
about 1,000.
Right now, the setback is 125 feet. Maybe this particular building is setback, but it's not 1,000 feet. I think it's about 450. I think it's about 450 feet. Yeah.
My GPS was wrong.
Yeah, no, well, that was the number that, I remember it from when we were looking at the Brightfield thing. It was something around that area. So right now, for a new building, the buffer has to be 125 under the current zoning. This increases it to 250.
In addition,
And then
yeah, you're going to say the
with
height.
the next, and within, from 250 to 300 feet, no building can be higher than 2 stories. Beyond that, it can be 3 stories, which is what the max height is.
And are they allowing parking in front of the buildings that are set back 250? Is the parking before the 250, closer to Broadway or behind?
No, it's a buffer. You can't build in it.
Okay.
In fact, the parking I think the way it's been written, the parking is allowed to be under the building, is that correct? In a sub-base,
It would have to be.
subgrade. Which is something that I know Brightview was looking into at the time they were here.
And it's kind of written to incentivize it, because it doesn't get counted in on your coverage if it's underground. If it's surface parking, it gets included in your coverage, and there's a limit on that, so.
I just will say, if you could try to use the microphone or have someone pass you the microphone if you can't get there, just easier for everyone to hear and have it recorded as well.
3 minutes also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 minutes, you keep it to 3 minutes, and also use your, last your name as well. Please, Alan.
Hi.
Can you
I'm
come
a
up to
little,
the microphone, please?
I can speak pretty
I
loud.
know, but it records better.
It records better?
It
That's
records
exactly
better.
what I don't want.
I know, but I can hear better from.
Okay, I just had a quick question because I've just been made aware of the whole situation. I knew there was little things going on with the rezoning. I wasn't clear on it, so I'm not well versed on it. My only question is, in the rezoning for that property, is there anything, I wanted to be clear on what you said earlier. Is there any chance that you would be, or someone would be attempting to put in a nursing home or an assisted living facility? Or is that going to be X'd out of the mixed-use issue?
No, there is, assisted living is a possibility on a property over 4 acres.
It's a possibility. Nursing home also?
No.
Because we went through all this with Brightview and Continuum over the years.
Hold on.
Well, no, I think we're talking about a continuum of care. Assisted living, there could be, it depends what you're calling a nursing home, but if you mean like
With nurses there.
enhanced assisted living, that would be allowed. That would be allowed.
Anyway,
Pardon?
That answers my question. Thank you.
You go first, you're on the edge.
Yes,
Easier,
okay.
yeah.
So, with regards to emergency service, Patty Graubart, 11 Sycamore Lane. With regards to emergency services, and particularly if there is going to be a long-term care facility, whether it be assisted living, vulnerable adults, medically fragile, right, people, I had a couple of questions about the arrangement that you suggested about having the resident or the facility mitigate the cost of emergency services, because I would think that would be contemplated in their property taxes, right? So you're asking them to pay in addition?
Yes.
So I just would like to know how that would work.
It's because it's a special permit, so we could make it a requirement that they'd have to.
But would it be in perpetuity? So if the
whatever we-
facility changed ownership?
I think
Or
we
if
need,
it
I think we
was
need to draft.
nonprofit?
Yeah, I think we need to draft the provision since the mayor just brought it up tonight, so.
Yeah,
I mean-
but even
But-
if now, you're saying that it wouldn't negatively impact it, but you would, then that would be determined when they're coming in with their application, and there are different ways to skin a cat. I mean, maybe when they make their application, you've got a bigger, ambulance service. Probably not, but I mean, there's
mean
different
they-
ways
they
to
come-
deal with it.
But I think
But
if
this law does not have to deal with it. All the law has to say is that those impacts have to be fully mitigated, and there's different ways it can be done.
But I
There's
think
no-
the village would like to understand how exactly that's going to work, because that has to work in perpetuity, right? So if this facility is built, right, it's in the village, we're going to be responsible for it. So my other question is, are other commercial residents, new commercial residents to the village going to be asked to pay as well, right? Because it's compounding. So if you have one facility, just one facility being asked to pay this, I can't imagine that they're not going to sue at some point and say, hey, why am I being treated differently? The other thing that I'm concerned about is, does this open the village and that facility up to liability? Because you basically admitted that we don't have adequate services to provide for these residents. And if, God forbid, there's an emergency, either with a resident where there's a delayed emergency response, or with a resident of this new facility, right? There's a roadmap that's being established here that basically says we're going to build this facility, but we don't have the resources to provide emergency services. So I would like the village and to do some due diligence
to make sure that somebody's speaking. Whether, is this legal, right? I would like to see a legal opinion as to whether this can be done. Thank you, Mary Ann. I appreciate it. I would like someone to speak to the New York State Department of Health, right? The office that monitors senior living facilities, to see if indeed this can be done, right? Because you're going to have residents who are going to move into this facility who are probably paying, what, $5,000 to $7,000 to live there a month, and who are being told that, hey, you're going to live here, but the village can't provide adequate emergency services for you, and we're going to outsource.
That's not what we're saying.
But this needs to be clarified. I don't see a plan in front of me, and I would like to see it. I think the village, right, deserves an adequate plan of how this is going to work.
Well, I'll tell you exactly how it worked. If someone came and said, we're going to put in a 100-room facility,
right,
and we can get an expert that says that's going to a month, 10 calls a month to make up a number. We say, you know what, we have to make sure that that is going to be adequately handled. And you know what, that might mean you have to pay for 3 EMTs and a driver. I mean, who knows? We can work that out.
But it's a very vague, and again, I'm saying you have to plan this out in perpetuity, right?
Well, you do, but if someone comes in and says, I'm going to have a 1-room assisted living facility, it's different than if they say there's going to be 100 rooms or 50 rooms or 25 rooms. So we can't come up with a law and say that if for 25 rooms, because who knows, in 50 years things might be very different also. You have to have a law that says we have to have an expert say that they are going to successfully mitigate this in perpetuity, no matter what.
But we do not have those resources now, right? So we're just planning out. We're saying, hey, we can't handle this, but down the road, we're going to be able to.
Well, Strawberry Lane, you have to fix the road before you can do anything. It's like this very similar thing. Like, before you put this facility in, which you don't get as a right, you have to get a special permit that we have to be happy with. Then that's what's going to do that.
But are they also going to pay for police and fire then? Right, because an ambulance, usually the police, right, accompanies the ambulance.
Yes, but we have full-time police that are here. We don't our ambulance corps is struggling to get volunteers.
That's what I'm talking about, right? We don't have the infrastructure, and all of a sudden, all of these EMTs are going to materialize because we're going to have an imaginary entity pay for
the 3 minutes is up.
these.
Your point is taken. We have to work on it.
Hi, my name is Janet Murph. I am the daughter of 50-year residents Jane and John Murph of 48 Park Avenue, Irvington, New York. I'm here because the first 4 pages of this document, which have the definitions, do not, living unit, full care living unit, independent living unit, and senior living facility. And these do not match and are not consistent with the New York State Department of Health definitions as per licensure of what you would have to have. I contacted someone who does licensure and went over these. What you have in an I'm so nervous, I'm sorry. What you could possibly have at an independent living unit is not regulated by New York State. That could just functionally be an apartment complex, and you could have anything there. And there is no need for the regulation of medical waste in the same that it would be for assisted living. And so in assisted living, you have multiple categories of assisted living. Assisted living residents, special needs assisted living residents, and the assisted living residents program, as well as the continuing care retirement community. I would like to see these titles on here meet and match those. My parents lived in an assisted living facility. I had to move my father out because he had spinal stenosis. I went to an assisted living facility that cost over $10,000 a month. You need clear, direct information if you are going to ask people to vote on something. This is not fair. You also have phrases in here that are like, including but not limited to. My understanding of the goal of zoning is limitation. There should be no phrases like that in here. I know that the goal is to get taxes for the community, and I think that this property should be developed, but you have to do it correctly, so that 50 years from now, it does make sense.
Please.
There will be 30 calls to EMS per month.
I'm Steve Gutman. I live up on Riverview. And first of all, I just want to thank everybody for their hard and diligent efforts at trying to get this together. I'm one of, I don't know, 7 or 8 families that sent in a letter. I think that we were all caught sleeping by this, which, you know, is really our own fault. So I really wanted to get answers to the questions that we presented to you in the letter. And I think the first thing that I just wanted to understand was, when I read this, it looked like a minimum 2-acre zoning, and I read the rest of the zoning law as sort of suggesting that you might be able to cram in a 150-bed assisted living facility into a 2-acre parcel.
You want me to address that?
Sure.
Okay, first of all, it is true that you can't have any use unless it's 2 acres, but you can't have every use if it's 2 acres. To have an assisted living facility, it has to have a minimum of 4 acres. That's listed on this, says assisted living, provided that the lot's at least 4 acres. I think only 4 of the lots in that area would meet that. And then you have to meet there's only so much coverage you can have, and buildings can only be so big. So just because there's a limit of 150, for instance, on the Maxon property, if that were fully built out, you know, to the maximum coverage and whatever, it would be like roughly, I think it was about roughly 78,000 square feet, which would, if you take your average size unit in a continuum of care thing, it'd be close to 1,000 feet. You're talking about maybe 80 units, 85 units in it. So just because it says the limit's 150, if your building's not big enough, it can
You
only...
can't just build a barrack and just stuff beds in there?
Well, I guess, because the concern of the village was looking at this was how big is the building? And I suppose, you know, you could have a building and put tiny, really tiny rooms in them, but you're not going to be able to get anybody to stay in them. In addition to which, then you might run into other issues. Then you might run into traffic issues, because if there's too much traffic generated from something that big. The main like limitation, I think, on most of these uses is how big the building can be.
Well,
And right now, you should know that under the proposed zoning, there is an average of 20% smaller than if people built out right now. Right now, these properties aren't built out. Only the northernmost property is built out. But if they were built out, then some of them could be 35%, you know, bigger than this would allow. Certainly way bigger than what's there now. So it does limit how big the buildings can be.
Okay, but it doesn't limit the density of what's in those buildings.
Sure it does. Well, first of all, it does on residential, you still have to read what's called the site capacity analysis, and you can only have 1 residential unit for every 5,000 square feet. So there's that limitation in it. And then the limitation on the assisted living facility, it would be the size of the building.
Okay.
That answered it? And again,
I don't
it's not on
feel,
all
honestly, I don't feel like I have a clear picture of what it is that limits any particular building to any particular density, that there's anything in here that says if you have a 200 square foot building or a 2,000 square foot building or a 20,000
Yeah,
square foot building,
that's not how
it would be
reads.
limited.
Yeah.
I understand it's not how it's written,
No,
and that's my
that's
point.
not how you would in zoning. You have like a limitation on coverage.
Right, I understand that the size of the building is
And on FAR, and
limited.
that's how it works. And actually, at some of the hearings on this, the planner had pictures of what these lots would look like. We're just trying to
We still have
determine
online.
what were the appropriate percentages of coverage? So the board looked at what would it look like if we allowed 20% coverage? What would it look like if we allowed 30% coverage? What would it look like if we allowed 35% coverage? And there were drawings of it, and there were public meetings, and the board did study those, and that's how it came to these numbers.
Okay, but you're saying then on a 4-acre lot, you could have a 150-person assisted living facility?
No. No,
Or
it's
not
not going to,
practically
because the
speaking.
building can only.
That's the
No, it's
that's
not
the
practically
answer.
speaking.
That's the answer. Practically, it doesn't make sense, but if somebody wanted to build a sardine can, we could have that. Well, that may be true too. Okay.
I
So,
mean, there's a whole host of
And there's other
impracticalities.
things, like even the largest lot is limited because it has steep slopes and things like that as well. So even like the buildable, 10 acres is buildable because you have to take away.
No, I mean, I actually did the calculation for each of the lots. And just not, so that the board would understand.
And we also want to know what the changes we're having versus what was allowed
What do you
now.
want to know for any particular lot, I can tell you.
Marianne, it was all about what if lots were combined? Sorry, what if lots were combined?
We've got to do one question at a time.
Questions to the mayor, and if he prefers it to me.
We'll get to this first and then go back to that.
okay, and then I had a question about setbacks as to why in most of the village, we have setbacks that are equal in the front and back, and here, the setbacks behind the buildings were reduced for these lots.
It's mostly because of the steep slopes on most of them. And we actually wanted to kind of move them
We
back.
also have the same front and back. That's not how it is in most of the village. The front is not, and the back aren't the same. For instance, in the one at 40 now, the front is 50 feet, the side's at 25, the rear is 40. The setbacks
Right,
proposed are
in my
75
letter-
in the front, 50.
In my letter, I said other than 1F40. Every other one of those
Well, right
setbacks.
now it's on one at 40, that's why I'm, but I think actually in most districts, I have to look at it.
Yeah, they're all that way, so I'd ask you to consider that. There's very little detail in the plan about how people have to screen their property between whatever the back of the buildings are, the sides of the buildings are, and what's behind them. And, I understand that there are zoning codes that are much more detailed about requiring pine trees and other screening and preserving what's there in order to screen out commercial property.
Can I make a comment about that real quick? 'Cause
Planning board process?
generally that comes through the planning board process as part of the seeker and as part of ensuring the minimum impact on the surrounding neighbors, et cetera. Screening is always specified at that point in time.
It also specifically says, appropriate screening shall be provided between the proposed use and any adjacent uses. The planning board may require additional screening and conditions it deems necessary to protect and enhance the visual appearance of the Broadway and the surrounding neighborhood. It's actually a very broad grant of authority, the planning board. The planning board can do anything to make sure that it's adequate.
I read that and I found it extremely vague, and I think
You're
that
better off with something, if you put limitations, there should be 6 trees between, well, that might not be enough. I mean, that's how you write. You write qualitative requirements.
I've seen other zoning statutes that are much more detailed about what the requirements are and might be beneficial. And then the building height, why are they allowed to do 3 feet further away from Broadway? I don't really.
3 stories?
Pardon? 3
3
stories, yes, I apologize.
I think it's following the topography and the visual.
Yeah, with visually, I mean, and the 3 stories is what the limit is right now. I mean, that's not permitting it any higher than it is now. Right now, the limit is 3 stories. It's not permitting it any higher. It's just, what it's doing is requiring closer to Broadway, it's got to be lower.
Okay.
And that goes back to kind of that looming thing that we had with Franklin.
So we did have some diagrams of site views from Broadway and looking at, especially the Maxon property, looking at the existing old manor house, the newer 60s construction, and looking at the impact of the 3-story, 2-story limitations and what that does from someone looking from Broadway up at the property.
Okay.
Those were done in the summer. Could we have similar pictures?
No, they were done diagrammatically, they weren't done.
Oh, I'm sorry, because in the PowerPoint presentation that you mentioned before, the images with the drawings in them are all from the summer. I just didn't know if it could be possible to take them in the winter so we could see it that way as well.
I think it's a total waste of time until it gets to the planning board, since those were just conceptual, something that the planning consultant did to say, if you had a volume like this, this is how. But the particular thing I was mentioning was basically a site view cut through section from Broadway up, as if you were looking up, and showing what parts of the structures would be would be in line of sight and what would be concealed just because of the angle looking up. But I think that anything going forward in the planning board would probably require very detailed, site renderings in both seasons and different positions around the property.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask about was whether we're required to allow non-taxable uses in the area.
To allow what?
We're allowed to,
Non-taxable uses.
whether they're taxable or not, we can't really figure out. There's certain things we can't ban.
Churches and schools.
Churches and schools, which are often not-for-profits.
And which are permitted now.
And they've been permitted, but so I think that those are we couldn't say you have to be a for-profit. You can negotiate with someone and try to get a pilot payment, but unfortunately you can't say it has to be for-profit.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's your letter.
I think everybody knows this, but it's probably worth saying again that all the meetings are archived and are available to be watched again. So when we're talking about the presentations that were made and the drawings and all of that, if you're willing to go back and watch the 7 or 8 or 9 meetings on this, it kind of slowly builds to where we are here. And I know not that many people are going to do that, but it's there, absolutely.
Next, please.
Hi, Kimberly Raby, 20 Strawberry Lane. Full disclosure, we own the residence that is touched by 3 of the 4 properties. We have been working with our neighbors to provide some feedback along the way. Something that didn't strike me until recently was that question of what if a developer would want to come in and buy several of these parcels. What would that do then to the size of the structure? Like say now if the 4-acre property is now 6 acres or 8 acres, is there a overall limitation in size? I just...
No, just what the percentage is. So if it's, you can have, we have 20%, I forget the coverage, whether it was 20, I think it was 20% coverage.
Is there a maximum coverage, I guess, for the...
No, it's not written into the...
If someone took over all the property, I think it'd be hard to say that you could still only have.
Well, the one limitation is there is a cap. The only thing that has caps are the size of the assisted living facilities. You could buy all 6 lots, and you can't have an assisted living facility with more than 150. And then there was a ceiling on the hotel too.
Yes.
Does it have, do we have, I can't remember now, so, do we have linear foot limitations on the frontage, or is that only in Brightview?
I was just thinking about that, because that is a very plausible scenario, that someone would come and buy several of these.
One of the issues, I agree that it's a potential issue, and one of the issues that I see is that besides, potential cost of buying those properties, is there's still a lot of topographical exclusion, for steep slopes and other features that would still limit some of the development. So, we keep poking at the Carfiella property, but or the ex-Carfiella property, but that, there's quite a bit of unbuildable topography there.
I remember very well, the issue with the rock, and obviously preserving that front lawn encroaches on literally my backyard. So I have a very personal and invested interest in this. I don't have another question. I just wanted to let the board know, and I think they've been delivered to Larry. We did have signatures from 75 residents asking you to either vote down or delay your vote tonight. And I think what I've heard Brian say is there's not a plan to, you are going.
March 2nd anyway. I mean, I think May 4th, except, I mean, we have a lot of things to work through. It'll be 10 years, but I don't think they're saying May 4th, because I think that was kind of a, but I think until March 2nd, we'll definitely delay it until March 2nd. It's just the next meeting.
That's the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess I'd like to, encourage my neighbors and fellow residents of Irvington, urge them to please ask all the questions that you need to and get this through. Let's.
And the counter, just would like to say, make sure you get the latest version of this, because I know some of the comments we've received by email have looked as if they were reading earlier versions of, before a lot of issues had been addressed that were brought forward. Now, I know the issue that you're talking about, combining property, has not been addressed.
Right.
We also appreciate all the input that we've gotten from Strawberry Lane and others, so we want to hear from everybody as well, so you should share your sentiments for sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm just want to urge my neighbors.
One thing, Kim, is that actually 2 of the properties are huge right now. One of them is almost 18 acres and one is 17 acres. So
Maxon is 4, what is Carafiello? Those were the two
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that have Broadway
Carafiello's
frontage.
8.
So it would be 12.
Carafiello's 8. And then there's 2 1-acre properties, and then there's an 18-acre separate. So.
And from a Strawberry Lane resident, right now, I know I've spoken with a couple people about this, we're designated IF 40. Is there different setbacks for IF 40 versus IF 20?
Yes.
There are. So, okay, then I'd like to carry that conversation on further, so, offline.
The IF 40 ones are greater.
Okay.
IF 20 is smaller.
Okay, then I'd like to carry on that conversation offline, Larry, okay, all right.
Who's next? Please.
I'm Tracy Calvin, 99 Bracebridge Lane. I have a couple of questions, and I may have missed parts of the comprehensive plan. So the first is, have there been accommodations to create a sidewalk on the east side of Broadway so that there is a pedestrian experience? One of the problems with that area is that people don't walk there, and it might be a way to encourage more of a pedestrian experience if there were a sidewalk required on that side. The second question is, has there been a design for a streetscape, meaning that trees have to be put on the sides of that part of the street if the build-out is more, or something that is, accommodation for more build-out? So that's the second question. The third question is, I assume, because I know everyone's very concerned about water, that there has been a lot of consideration for, if it's really big build-out, that there's a lot of water that falls onto the streets downhill, and this is always a problem when there's construction. But pervious surfaces, green roofs, a lot of the new alternatives to dealing with heat, water retention, etc. There been a lot of discussion about that? I think that's...
Sure.
You may have to repeat some parts of the question.
Sidewalks we go first.
There's no requirement for sidewalks, but there is an incentive that you could get, I think, get a little bit more coverage or whatever if you provide a community amenity such as a sidewalk, but that would be in the discretion of the board, whether they think it's worth it and whether they want to let you do it. For the impervious, actually, there are more limitations on this, on how much coverage there could be. There's less than there is now. But there's no construction that can go up anymore that doesn't have to maintain all the water flow on the site. That's just a requirement of state law. It's a requirement that the planning board is very, very, enforces really rigorously, and that's where we spend a whole lot of the money, most of our engineers' time is spent on that.
Yeah, I know, I know,
Yeah,
but
you know.
it's just when it's, yeah, right.
So any application, we have to meet that. What's the third part?
Trees,
Streetscape.
Streetscape, yeah.
There's no streetscape requirement in here, but.
But I mean, a design plan that would accommodate whatever.
You have to come up with one. One of the things you have to submit is a landscape plan. You have to, what you submit, you have to show every tree that's more than 8 inches in diameter around the plan, so that the planning board has always been very protective of the
Yeah, no,
trees.
actually, what I'm thinking is a overall streetscape plan that would include a requirement for sidewalk and something that would be an overall design, so that when you walk down that, or walk up, if anyone does, but it encourages them to do it, is that there's something that's really, is a continuous buffer that maybe would enhance the experience and make it more pleasant.
One thing I wanted to say about this is that right now we're severely constrained, as you know, because of the stone walls that are effectively right against the line of traffic. There has been a project that's been going on for the last 18 months, I want to say, maybe 2 years, I'm not sure, 18 months. The Route 9 transportation corridor that was focusing on walkability and bikeability, and, designs were done for each village. And one of the solutions for Irvington is if you can get space for sidewalks in 2 ways, one of which is to reduce the number of lanes of Broadway, which in the North Broadway corridor is not necessarily a good solution. And the other would be you would have to push the walls back. The existing walls would have to be pushed back and rebuilt.
And so there's no possibility of having the sidewalks be on the other side of that wall?
Well, but then you're in private property.
Yeah.
So you'd have to have
So it would
easements.
have
You
to be
could do that.
a public taking in some way.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I don't know. I mean, someone could decide it's cheaper to do that than move the walls, and so therefore they give some sort of, common right of way to use easement for public walking. I don't know.
But at this point, it's like what we're trying to do is create incentives for thinking about how to incorporate those kinds of things.
Right, rather than creating a design, whatever. Right. I also hear, because I haven't been a part of these conversations, that people are particularly scared about assisted living and nursing homes because they tax the community more. Has there ever been a consideration for just throwing that out of, and I understand there are economic incentives for having that possibility, but what if the same, I'm sure this has been talked about, I'm so sorry if I'm repeating things, but why is it so important for us to keep assisted living and medically taxing structures in this plan?
A big part of it is that it's kind of the demographics of New York State are saying that we need more and more of them, and there's, we don't have one in Irvington. Yes, they have them in Tarrytown, they have them in Greenberg, they have them in Ardsley, but I think that's why. And I think it's also of the properties, of the people that are willing to spend money on doing some of these properties, that's where the money is, right? So that's part of it. I think what we've seen, like if you think about the big White House, used to have 200 cars every day because it was office space was hard to come by in Westchester County, so it was not popular. That was the big thing. The other big thing now is like urgent care. We decided that was a traffic nightmare, so we said no urgent care. We also think that while it's taxing on emergency medical services, and I think there's no doubt about that, which is a big hurdle for them to have to prove that they can overcome. There is no draw on schools. So, if we put a bunch of multifamily there, that's obviously a big draw on the schools. This has zero draw on the schools. It's a big taxpayer. And it's, I think, too, people say that, they can become a nonprofit. But when you have a special permit, you can say, you know what, you're going to have it, so you have to pay a pilot
or you're for profit. So if you could even just make it, forget it, you don't pay taxes, you just pay a pilot forever, and that can happen. So I think there's ways around that trap of, first of all, most of them that I'm aware of are publicly traded companies that have these giant facilities. They're not going to become non-for-profit because they make a lot of money and for their shareholders, and I know the shareholders typically like when you go non-for-profit, but they're not going on a tangent. But I think that's the main reason, is that these are the people that have money. There's a huge desire. There's a backlog in a lot of places. Cost is obviously always an issue. That's why we've looked at trying to make it part of it affordable, which isn't always easy to do. But that's something that we've kind of made a priority as well, because paying $10,000, $12,000 a month is not easy. And that seems to be what you have in Westchester now.
Low traffic.
I guess the other thing is, what you hinted at is just a full spectrum of housing stock in terms of, as people age, they don't necessarily have to move out of the community to be taken care of, which right now, basically you do, as Brian pointed out. A lot of people go to Atria or to Kendall or something like that, with older, folks with older parents. So that's part of the rationale, I guess, that it'd be, because
That it fulfills a need for the community.
Yeah, a very large increasing demographic. We're all getting older.
I'm sorry, I won't stand here any longer. One more question, which is affordable housing. How does this work into this plan? Is there any requirement for it? Is that a part of this mixed use? It could be, if someone could put an affordable housing apartment building.
Well, if you're gonna put in multifamily, you've got here the usual village affordable housing requirement, and then there's also an affordable requirement for the assisted living, which is a smaller affordable requirement, it's 5%, but there's an affordable requirement.
All right, thank you.
Please.
Hi, my name's Robert Kelly. My wife and Jane and I moved here 9 years ago when our daughter was 5 years old. We absolutely loved Irvington. Sparsely populated, quiet. We saw little old ladies walking in the street, seemed super safe. And the reason I'm here is I just want to make sure that Irvington doesn't change. And I'm really thankful and reassured from everything you've said that you put a lot of thought into this and that you have the same goals to really try to keep Irvington having that character. You're worried also about revenues for the city, so that's great. I only have one question left. I think everybody's answered my questions. I'm mainly concerned that the crime rate doesn't go up as a result of any of this, and I've heard that we really want affordable housing, and with affordable housing, I associate crime. Just to give you an example, the show Desperate Housewives, as revenge, I think one of the characters turned his home into a homeless shelter, which just had a devastating effect on everyone.
Let's just be clear. We're not talking about Section 8 housing. We're not talking about housing projects. We're talking about a state, a county median. To qualify for affordable housing, a family of four has to, or any family has to earn 80% or less of the median income. For a family of four in Westchester County, that's $100,000 approximately. So you're talking about a family that's earning $80,000. We're not seeing a crime rate here.
All right.
I think that's one of the big misperceptions about affordable housing, is that it's a project.
We're trying to get people who provide services in this community, who work in this community.
Some people
a teacher, for instance, people who volunteer at the fire department, people to be able to afford to live here. When we were having one of these, you got me started now, when we had one of these meetings about affordability, I will never forget this. One of the, I don't know the correct name, but one of the junior clerics at one of the local churches couldn't afford to live here. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, well, thank you. You answered my questions. I really appreciate all the thought you put into this.
Thank you very much. Let me go first people first, and then we'll go back to you, Don. Please.
My name's Peter Paderi. I live on 5 Meadowbrook Road. I have a lot of comments. I'll try to make them quick. I'll try to fit them in 3 minutes. I just think that the zoning proposal doesn't accomplish what the comprehensive plan and it itself say they want to accomplish. They do the opposite. The plan says that they want to maintain a small town open space character that makes Irvington the unique and desirable place it is to live, and to remain much as it is in appearance, the corridor. In fact, it says that the single-family development is going to compromise the open space and existing topography, but the commercial institutional development in this code is going to be worse because the limits are much higher than allowed for residential in a 1F40 zone. This rezoning would allow development that's 3 to 7.5 of what's there now. The new building on, yes, I did the calcs. The new building on 90 North Broadway, the white building site, could be the length of a football field, which is the same length as the Trent building, and it's not going to look as good as the Trent building. The 250-foot buffer is not going to accomplish much because the land rises up sharply up from Broadway. So you're going to be looking sharply up at a football field's length building that's much closer than the one that's there now. The building coverage that will be allowed is more than double what's there now on the Broadway site, and 2.7 times what's there on the Abbott House site. And it's more than double what would be allowed for residential development in this zone, in the existing 1F40 zone. The parking requirements are large for these commercial uses. If you've ever been to, I'm sure people have been to assisted living facilities, and they're always full of parking. And they can cover more than 1/3 of the site. And just a question, I don't want to break the thing, but if pervious paving is used, I don't know whether that could be increased. So you'll also be looking up at a sea of parking. So you're not going to be looking, it's not going to preserve the appearance, and it's not going to preserve the look of what's there now at all. It's going to do the opposite. And just to remind that the previous planner recommended that the 120 zoning were to change to 1F40 based on the original comprehensive plan to mitigate, to preserve open space.
That was something that this board decided to do when we were looking to kind of stop things then. Because we didn't actually like the single-family use that we saw there, so that's when we upzoned that. That wasn't from a planner, that was from us.
Okay, it says that it was recommended by the village planner, but you did it, of course. You put it in.
Yeah, I think we came up with that idea, because we actually saw the subdivision of residential there, and we didn't like it.
Okay, all right. So I'm saying that was a good move. Keep it that way. In terms of the use, when the board says that it wants to keep what's there now, basically those are all office uses, which are quiet. They're 9 to 5 weekday uses, but assisted living, hotel and restaurant uses, as well as medical offices, will bring in a lot of temporary transient traffic and a lot of service traffic, laundry, garbage, food service, and they're active 24/7. I have a question about the subjective characteristics of boutique hotel and non-formula full-service restaurant. I just wonder how they're affordable, and how do we know we're not going to get an Applebee's or, you know, a hotel like the one on 119 and Taxter. Pointing out that the comprehensive plan survey said that half the respondents did not want assisted living, and of course reminding you that 2 recent assisted living proposals were rejected or by the board or withdrew after Mayor Smith didn't support it. The comprehensive plan, the Broadway Corridor Committee put a large number of cons after the higher density residential and commercial development, including increased density, greater traffic impact, especially during rush hours, which are already high, and the effect on municipal infrastructure. There's the rationale one thing that you did just say has to do with assisted living being very conducive to not, for the organizations to become not-for-profit, either before they submit or after they establish the facility. So maybe you can answer this question after I finish my myriad points. This pilot fee that you're talking about that would be in perpetuity, I'm not familiar with that. That would reassure me, but the notion that we're going to potentially develop this and have it all go off the tax rolls and increase everyone else's taxes, I think would be a disaster. And then to just kind of continue on what Kimberly Raby was saying, the zoning, according to the planner's own presentation, you wouldn't want to combine all the lots, the 4 big lots. You would want to have them separate, and you could put 150 beds on 3 of the 4 lots and 100 on the 4th lot to the standards that planner submitted. So that would be at 550 units on 48 acres, compared with Kendall, which has 240 on 22
I don't
acres.
think that's actually true, because it has to be 4-acre minimum to have.
Each of those 4 lots are more than 4 acres.
No, the maximum, you're talking about the number of units, if you calculate out, the maximum number that could go on the max on site would be 88 on the Carafiello 118. And then the only 2 that could have 100, that could reach the max, assuming they could meet traffic things, are the big, the 18-acre and the 17-acre. It's a minimum of 4 acres. That is not the only limitation. There's other limitations on the size
Okay,
of the
well,
building.
under those type of units, that would be still 300 plus. But I guess the planner, these are the planner's numbers. I guess he's talking about the smaller memory care units, that would be smaller units. And he put those numbers of 150 for 3 lots and 100 on the smallest lot, the smallest 4-acre lot. And then when you say that the developers, this is what developers want to do now, my point is, how is it going to help the community, not how is it going to help the developer? Although if it doesn't go off, if this is the case with your pilot plan, if it doesn't go off the tax lots, at least we're getting some tax benefit from it. That was the scariest thing for me.
Which honestly, right now, there's many uses that could go off the tax rolls, and there's nothing we can do about it, so.
Well, you mentioned that it's not possible to
You can't get
prohibit.
rid of religious institutions, you can't get rid of schools.
Why is that, by the way?
Why? It's the United States Constitution.
Well, there are a lot of zoning districts that don't allow churches. In New York City.
Call Greenberg.
Residential, if it's residential, business districts don't have to allow, residential have to allow.
Oh, that has residential. Okay.
So, yeah, and that's actually one of the proposed buyers of the Carafiello property was a religious organization that would have gone right off the tax rolls. Just like the Holy Spirit organization. And Abbott House also was, so, I mean, that's something else that's why we don't want to prevent religious institutions or schools from coming into these properties. This is a reality that we were facing, and those are fairly big taxpayers, and that's why to allow other potential uses that weren't just, those were kind of like those were the hot properties, the hot buyers for those properties were not-for-profits.
Okay. I just want to mention that what's ironic about the zoning proposal is that since I've just shown that actually the uses that preserve the most open space are single-family uses, whether you think that they're viable at this point, by increasing the minimum lot size from 40,000 to 80,000 square feet, you're basically making that impossible. Right, you're making it a 2-acre zoning for a single family. That's never going to happen. So, to conclude, I'm just advocating keeping the 1F40 zoning, adding provisions to allow the single-family development alongside the existing office uses on the same lot, and allow multifamily development within the existing historic properties to encourage their being reused. That's it for me.
Thank you. Who's next?
John's up already, and then we'll have the two reviews.
Careful.
Always have a
John.
John Dawson, 76 Hudson Avenue. I've been listening tonight, and I'm hearing that the board, with this document, has a vision of what they're trying to accomplish. But that vision doesn't seem to be getting to the people who have another idea of what's going to happen. And I think the two are at crosshairs. And I think that's part of the problem in the entire country. We don't pay enough attention to things until it's too late. I think that you've put a lot of things into this, and a lot of work has obviously been done. You've tried to cover everything you could under the law. But the couple of questions that I have that concern me directly, first of all, is on one of them you said that they have to have access and egress to the property directly from East Sunnyside Lane. Where? But it says, and/or East Sunnyside Lane. Where?
Well, there's one property now that goes right on East Sunnyside Lane. The Holy Spirit.
Okay, well, as long as it's there, I'm still kidding here. Because Hudson Avenue, on the maps, is a connected road into River.
It has to be direct on East Sunnyside, so the only property that fronts on East Sunnyside is the Holy Spirit property.
Okay.
Which is now the tax rolls.
You did start to respond to one of the thoughts that came to me when I first heard about this. I got an email about this. Emergency services, police, fire, ambulance. I mean, I heard things all night long about, you have to, the people in this village don't understand that the ambulance corps is a volunteer organization not supported by this village board, by the taxpayers, not through their tax dollars, through their contributions. It's two separate things. Brian, you did I thought, you did an admirable job of trying to explain how you would deal with that. And first of all, you have to get the zoning passed before that even becomes an issue.
Right.
And I think people are saying, let's not pass the zoning and let's just keep things the way they are, and that's unrealistic, as you also said. But one of the concerns that I have is not even fire, which I'm not sure you know better than I do if we have the capability of handling anything over there with that. I'm worried about the highway department, the water department, and sanitation, especially the water department, because we have over 100-year-old pipes that go down to the river on Main Street. And every time something happens, the street gets dug up, and then something happens later on somewhere else, and then something happens. Either we replace all of the pipes that are old in this village, or we're going to have even more problems once we start to deal with this. And also, do we have enough water pressure coming in? Riverview for a long time had problems with water pressure. Mountain Road had problems with water pressure. Is this going to impact that as well? If we get this super development that people are worried about. I don't know, and you don't know, and nobody in the room knows if we're going to see this development the way people are seeing worst possible scenarios. But have we given a lot of thought to how are we going to deal with this financially? Because that's going to be a major hit on our village budget.
I think, well, the water is the only one I can kind of address, because I've had a lot of conversations with Jim Englishby. I actually said to him a bunch of times, I said, look, we've never had lower interest rates, in my lifetime and probably most people's lifetimes. What do we have to do for the water? And he told me that his plan that he has now, which isn't wholesale replacement of pipes, which was my plan as a layman who doesn't, I'm not an engineer at all. He actually talked about replacing valves, so you can shut things down and repair them and all that kind of stuff, and that's what he has a plan to do that. As you said, Riverview Road had issues. One of the bigger issues is that we have all the water up top, and there's all the pressures down the bottom, right? So it just kind of goes that way. Then we just finished a big project on Riverview Road. There's a pump station that regulates a lot of the pressure now. That was one of the big issues. They'd be doing something, and then all of a sudden, Bridge Street would blow up, because that's where all the pressure is. So they put in a lot of redundancies. Jim Englishby has done an unbelievable job in the water department. I think things like sanitation and things like that, we are minimally staffed. that's something you'd have to weigh, I think, if there's gonna, but I also think you could require it to be private karting or something like that, if it makes sense. I think, again, when you have a special permit process, a lot of these issues could be, I don't think you can ask them to fix our water system like for 100 years, but things like garbage, things like EMS, if they needed a crossing guard or something, again, the traffic has to be, it's very tight and fit and defined. So I think there's actually, a lot of the scenarios of combining property and building a big research plant, Regeneron South or something, it's going to be, with the traffic requirements, it's going to be very hard to do a lot more than there is right now, in my opinion. And, there are a lot of other limiting factors as well, but that's part of it. I mean, again, my vision for there is not to put a Regeneron or something like that. It's to kind of have what's there now, and to have it be viable. That's what I keep getting worried that they're going to sell it to a not-for-profit that isn't going to maintain it, and it's off the tax rolls. So to me, you have to, unfortunately, we only have one property owner that's willing to talk to it, that kind of participated in this at all. The second largest property, the Holy Spirit Association, doesn't have any interest in dealing with us really. That's obviously not on the tax rolls. Who knows what's going to happen to that long term? So there's, I think the parking, the traffic, which is already a disaster, on North Broadway. I think we all recognize that. That's why we wanted to make sure that the uses have to be creative with their uses, and we hold the cards with the special permit to say that you can't just be coming in at prime time and having wreaking havoc on it. So.
I just want to address about the water issue, the impacts on water and sanitation. In addition to the special permit requirements, any use that comes in is going to have to go through the State Environmental Quality Review Act review, which the planning board pursues. And among the things you have to do, issues you have to show is that you're not going to have any impact on sanitation, and you're not going to have any impact on sewer. If you are, then you have to be able to mitigate them. So that, you're not going to get anything, pardon?
It's all looked at, any impact that we talk about tonight is looked at it as part of the environmental review.
In the environmental review that the planning board does. So there's a bunch of, besides getting your special permit, you have to get site plan approval by the planning board. Before you would get site plan approval, you have to have what's called SEQA review, which is really very rigorous. And that's where the couple of other projects that came up with, mainly Brightview, it was a very, very extensive SEQA process that we never finished because, they pulled out.
Thank you. I also heard mentioned a couple of times tonight, this is going to generate revenue for the village, and that's good. Having been on the school board, you all know, as you already did this evening, tax certs. It's great when businesses are going along in good times, but when things turn around and you got to pay those tax certs, they go back and it's interest on it, and it really hurts going forward. So I know you guys already have that, thought out, that you're not looking at this as, we're going to get great funds out of this, and we're going to be able to do wonderful things. I know that you're more realistic, but I don't think the people understand that as much. And I just thought of one other department that you really need to think about, and that's recreation. Because if we have all those seniors, they may want to use our facilities and things.
Joe's smiling in the back.
Yeah, I forget you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, there's still a recreation fee, right, associated with the...
Depending on development.
Hi. I'm Neil Marr. I live at 1 Shady Lane. I went to one of these meetings before, and sorry. I'm Neil Marr. I live at 1 Shady Lane. I was at one of these meetings before, and I just want to thank the board for allowing the civic dialogue to go on. I mean, I think that after 12 meetings, you very much could have voted tonight. You really could have, and it would have been in your right to do that as the board members. But I think you listened, you saw that they wanted to continue talking about this, and I really think it's incredibly positive that you responded in the way you did. So thank you very, very much for that. I would encourage the conversation to continue. I think that you've done a great service here by getting people not excited, but involved in this, to get them interested in learning more about it, which I think is really important, because I think if they do learn, about this, they will see it in a different way, and then you can also get them invested into making this plan what you want and what they want. So I would encourage, you had a working group in the beginning to help you begin this process. I think it might be positive to now have a working group to help you refine the program, the law even more. I think that maybe, March might be a little bit quick, but I just hope that you let this democratic process continue, and thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Alan, come quick before someone else new comes.
I have to use the microphone?
Please.
Very good. Thank you. I'm just going to face this way for a minute. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ellen Lewitt, and I am captain of Irvington BAC EMS, and I've been with them for 46 years. So just so you know where I'm coming from. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I was not prepared to speak tonight, but in sitting here listening to all of you, and I must say I'm quite impressed, because a lot of you have spoken, and you brought up some very good and valid points from all sides of the spectrum. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody should be heard. So I thank you all for at least giving your opinions for whatever it may be, whether it's mixed use or, like I said, I'm not well versed in what the whole property thing is. I was just made aware of the situation tonight, that there was a meeting, which is why I came. But you all have valid points and very good points, and you have valid concerns, so I hope that the board listens. And I thank you for sharing that, because it enlightened me on a lot of things tonight, just listening to you all to find out what's going on. I intend on coming here to the board in the near future with a very prepared, accurate, and detailed statement about Irvington EMS. That will not take place tonight. What I am concerned about is, we have been through this before with Continuum and Brightview. They didn't come in. EMS is extremely taxed right now. And when I say taxed, it is very, very difficult. We are a volunteer agency. We do not get any funding from the village whatsoever. We rely on donations from the general public. Now, to my knowledge, there's approximately 6,500 to 7,000 residents that live in this village. We put out fund drives twice a year. Out of that fund drive, we only get approximately 400 donations. Okay? That's not very many. A nice amount, but your average donation is about $25. It costs approximately $175,000 to keep EMS running, because medical stuff is extremely expensive. I'm running an EMS agency with only 16 people, 24/7, 365, okay? We answer approximately 500 emergency calls for service in this village a year. Few of them go out of town. If an ambulance is busy in Dobbs Ferry or Terrytown, we have to go there from time to time and assist their patients because they're busy. Our VAC is unique in terms that other VACs in the area, everybody's having problems with getting volunteers. That goes without saying. Volunteerism throughout America is pretty much dead. And it's very difficult to get people in, especially with the amount of training you need to become an emergency medical technician and ride on one of these ambulances. It is very intense. Notwithstanding, other VACs have an advantage over us. Dobbs Ferry VAC doesn't have to pay for their building. Their building is owned by their village. They don't have any of the expenses. They don't have to pay Con Ed. They don't have to pay their water. They don't have to pay for building repairs. They don't have to pay for anything. Terrytown's headquarters is funded by the village of Terrytown. Ardsley, their VAC is a building that I believe they rent from the village for a few dollars a year. Hastings is a fire department. So we're the only agency really in the area that's its own entity. We own our property, we own our building, we own all of our equipment, and we have to pay for everything we have. And like I said, most residents are not aware of the fact that we are not funded by the Village of Irvington's government or by the taxpayers. Your taxes don't pay for us, and we are volunteer. We rely on donations, and they're not coming in. So the bottom line is our funds have been going downhill and depleting. Since there's not enough volunteers, I was forced a few years back to put on what's called paid per diems. Wherever I have holes, I actually have to pay somebody to be an EMT or a driver. We don't pay them a fortune, but they get paid by the hour. And that has depleted our funds. So I wasn't going to speak tonight, but there's something that the mayor said about half an hour ago in the course of addressing one of you's question about EMS and how it could tax us. Just for say on the property, you had a small restaurant and a barber shop and a couple of places. I'm just giving an example. The call volume we would get EMS-wise in those places is pretty slim. It would be just kind of like any other restaurant that's on Main Street in Irvington or anything else. The minute you start going into assisted living facilities, nursing home type things, medical facilities, the call volume goes through the roof, okay? We're already pumping out 500 emergency calls a year. And I've seen it. I'm very well versed with the other VACs. Ardsley is just sinking with the atrium over there. As a matter of fact, they get so many calls there that they can't handle the calls in their own village, and Dobbs Ferry is constantly having to pick up their residents, which means Irvington's constantly having to go to Dobbs Ferry to pick up their residents because Dobbs Ferry is in Ardsley. We in Irvington have also responded to the atrium in Ardsley because sometimes they have 3 or 4 patients that need to go at the same time. I don't know what it is, and that's not even supposed to be a nursing home. That's supposed to be more like an assisted living type place, but their call volume is extreme, and 90% of all the calls Ardsley gets occur in the atrium. We're a small village, and I'll have to be honest with you. I don't want to see an assisted living or a nursing home type thing come into this village. It's going to bury everybody. The fire department goes out, I think, every day. I mean, they must be going out like 5, 6, 7 times a day. Sometimes they're short on volunteers too, with just a driver and a fireman. I mean, you know, we rely on the fire department, we rely on services. Your taxes do, by the way, pay for the fire department, okay? Your fire department is covered by your taxes. EMS is not, and never has been. Other places are covered by it, we're not. Okay, now I'm not here asking for anything else other than we're running out of money. And eventually, if we do run out of money, the village will have to figure out what to do, okay? But a comment that you made when someone over here, I believe, asked about the EMS and would it be taxing on EMS, and I believe your exact words were, well, they'll have to find a way to work around it, okay? That...
No, that's mitigated, is what I said. So how about,
okay, but
you had an example, how about if they say, we're going to give you 25 paid EMTs and pay for 3 new ambulances and pay for your, just throwing it out there. I mean, I think there's something.
Well, we went through that before with Continuum and Brightview, and you can't force them to do that.
Whoa.
You can't make them by law. You can't make them join an ambulance corps and be part of the process.
No, not join an ambulance corps, actually pay the ambulance corps $135,000 or whatever as part of the, we have Mercy College can only, there's so many things in their special permit that they have to certify. You know, that's the kind of thing we're talking
Well,
about.
I believe this lady over here brought up the fact, how can you make one person pay for it and not the other? Was that correct? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's because, as you said before, the barber shop would not be taxing, but they would be.
They would be. And the amount of staff that I will have to put on to accommodate,
Plus,
plus...
saying these are all things we can work out.
All right.
You know what? They don't come in. That's the whole thing.
Okay,
Like, they
but
can't figure it out.
I'm bringing,
Sorry.
you will have your concerns for here, and they're all very valid and really good points, and I don't think anybody had a bad point. You know, maybe for some it's landscaping, some it's sidewalks, some it's what would go there, how busy would the traffic be, water issues, environmental issues. All of those are wonderful, and that's what makes this a great room, with everybody giving an opinion, and I can stand in the back and listen to everybody's view and get a whole picture of what's going on, which is terrific, okay? I love hearing lots of opinions and getting lots of views, and then you kind of get a whole picture. My picture is, will EMS get buried with something like that going in?
I think we have 2 issues here. We have the current issue with IVAC, and I want to invite you back to a work session to come in and talk to us about what potential plans you have, because I've been, actually, it's ironic, I haven't heard from you, I've heard from other people.
Yeah, I mean, I have sat down with you and Larry Shopper and the police chief in the past, and, you know, let you know that there are issues and problems, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. But so I think we should do that, and then, you know, honestly, like, you know, it's almost like, any of the things, if they can't figure out the solution, they don't come. It's kind of like we continue when Brightview are not here.
Or you don't give them the approval.
If we don't give them the approval. If it's, you know what, there's no way to do it, then that's really too bad that they can't come, because we don't want to, destroy our EMS to have a, assisted living facility here. I could picture ways that they could be a factor in saving our EMS here as well. I don't know, because there's nothing in front of us right now.
Yeah, that, like I said, I do remember that came up with them in the past, but we can't make them do it. We're not for profit, we can't make them do it.
Yes, we can. We can say you have to pay us and we can give it to you. We can work this out. I know we can.
Okay. So, a big thing for us right now, it's staffing and money.
No impacts on emergency services, however.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then they don't get approval.
And both of our ambulances are very old. For those who don't know, the ambulances we're running with right now, though we keep them in excellent shape, are...
This is a different conversation.
No, somebody asked me, so I wanted to let her know. They're 1997 and 1999 respectively, so they're over 20 years old. How long they're going to last, I don't know. But we don't have $350,000 to buy a new ambulance. So,
all these are valid issues that we should
everybody gave their issues, and I wasn't going to do this tonight, but I decided, hearing all the things, I'd like some of the reason I spoke. I could come to you and Larry and sit down over coffee, and we could have all the conversations in the world. I'd like some of the folks in this room to know, where we stand and what's going on.
We can invite you to a public meeting so you can...
Oh, I have every intention on doing that in the near future.
Great.
Okay? I thank you for your time, and I thank you all for your time.
And can
Thank
everyone
you. Karen?
Guess we're gonna pass the hat.
I'm Karen Schatzel. I'm a 50-year resident of Irvington, and my only purpose in coming up here tonight is to thank the trustees and the professionals we have in front of us. These hearings have been going on for months, and other than the specifics about the ambulance corps that I heard tonight, every single issue that was brought up has been brought up before here and has been deliberated and considered very seriously. I don't know if all of you are even aware of the fact that Abbott House has been here since 1963 on a special use permit, and they've been reviewed and reviewed, and in 1963 nobody ever anticipated that we were going to have unescorted immigrant children coming here. So things change, but our board of trustees and our professionals are trying to plan for this, and they have done it very diligently. And lastly, I would just like to remind everyone in this room that there is not a single career politician here in this room, at least not that I am aware of. These are all our fellow residents. I recognize that everybody in this room had, well, either a two-career household or children, or they go to Florida for 6 months and they can't keep up with things. But these hearings have been going on. People have been expressing their concerns, and the board has been dealing with it. And I thank you for your patience, for your diligence, for your dedication, and for being accessible to us when you are out on the sidewalk. You all have careers. You are all professional people. I thank you, and I would just remind everyone, please be a little bit considerate of these people, because they are serving in our place, because we don't have the ability or the time or the willingness to do it. Thank you.
I think that's one good reminder from Karen's great speech. Thank you, Karen. If you
hear Karen's speech, if you go on.
if you were, like I think Mr. Kelly said earlier that he had no idea this was going on, I urge people to go and try and sign up. We don't send out too many emails, I don't think. And if we do, let us know. We'll try to cut them back. But you can sign up just for the agendas, so you know at least what's going on. I think the thing we dread the most is hearing, hey, I didn't know this was happening. Because we tried it through emails, email is probably the biggest way we do it, but we also post on social media, which is its own worst enemy. But we want your input.
The bulletin board.
Bulletin board, yeah, I guess we could do that, but that's just I don't think we can post the agendas there anymore. Do we do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We still put them on the bulletin
To
board.
make it a little more user-friendly, first of all, when you get the email, it just said North Broadway corridor, and I have been at the prior meetings, but it would never have dawned on me that either Abbott House or Maxon were North Broadway corridor, because they're not really Broadway properties. Second, then, if you want to find out what that is, and you're on your phone and you try and click through, you actually don't get to the plan. You get to the main website, and it's a little hard to navigate, and you can't, until you can actually, it's a little bit
I think
more
there's
work,
actually,
I think, and it's
I think I know what you're talking, there's two ways to do it. There's a way that brings you to the website, and there's another one that you actually get the attachment. And if you get the attachment,
Backup
yeah,
of
so
the agenda,
that actually will
that's
have-
what you want.
That's basically
Little
this.
backup.
We need a mobile
middle schooler to fix it.
Yeah. So it's, I appreciate the
But
feedback.
I did have the experience of, and I think I mentioned this the first meeting I came out, emailing a couple of neighbors and they said, we had no idea that that's what North Broadway meant. It's kind of a misnomer.
I don't know what we call it, but.
Plus, what goes behind it.
How about Abbott House and Maxwell? People would have known that,
Oh, you're just, Walter?
So, Walter Montgomery, I'm here because I live on Strawberry Lane, because I'm chairman of the board at Abbott House, and I want to second Karen's great speech, so I won't repeat it, but I do want to second it. Well, she's much more eloquent, but as somebody who sat there, I could appreciate the work that you all have done, how difficult it is, how fastidious it's been. But I wanted to say something, actually, in the context of my another role, and that is a member of your Traffic Calming Commission, which has been somewhat dormant, but not totally. And we have done various things over the years, including addressing safety on Broadway, North Broadway. I think that in conjunction with what we're talking about tonight, the rezoning, it would be good for the community to push harder to make changes on North Broadway. Now, I know there's the Route 9 plan coming. I think the odds are that I'm not going to see anything in my lifetime with regard to Route 9 planning by the state. But I think there are things we can do along the way to mitigate some of the dangers on North Broadway. Our committee has talked about that. I've talked with Larry a little bit about that. And I would urge the board to push hard with the state to try to begin to make some changes that would improve safety on North Broadway. It is a state jurisdiction, but we can exert some influence. We could bring in an expert to assess the possibilities and then proceed from there. That's all I would urge, because there are some serious safety issues on North Broadway, and I think the village could do more to try to accelerate action there and not wait for the Route 9 corridor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Walter, since I'm on the liaison to the committee, I want to say that I agree with you. I think, and my concern, which I've tried to express in the past about the Route 9 plans, transportation corridor, is that in fact, if we were to go forward with that implementation as presented for the village, it would be a catastrophe on North Broadway. And we've had a traffic consultant come in and tell us exactly how bad it would be. So we know that's not going to, at least for the village, it's not going to happen the way it was presented. But that doesn't address any of the safety issues that you're speaking about. So let's try to get, I'm sure, that kind of concisely put together again. And I don't know how concise your handoff to Larry has been on this stuff.
Well, I haven't just simply dumped it on Larry.
No, I understand that. But
Larry's been very cooperative in talking about the issues, but...
In the past, we've had like...
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
And the argument is simply that we don't have to simply say it's a state jurisdiction, therefore we can do nothing. I think we can lobby, in effect, with the state more forcefully for some changes.
Right.
but we ought to assess what the possibilities are, perhaps through some expert opinion assessment, and then move from there. It's a very dangerous area. It's very hard to get across Broadway. So I just urge we try to do something.
And the side streets.
The side streets, right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Otherwise, we will keep this open until at least March 2nd, and we'll see where we go from there. Continue to send in your letters. Actually, I should make sure that, I believe most of the letters were, the Strawberry Lane letter was, I believe, addressed. These are all obviously in the record. I just want to read them all. There was the one that you got the signatures on that was relatively short, so I'll read it in case, because I don't recognize most of the names as being here tonight. So we urge the residents of the village board not to adopt a zoning resolution creating the North Broadway mixed-use district at your February 20th meeting. Instead, we ask you to delay your vote until at least May 4th to reject the proposal altogether. I only recently became aware of the rezoning proposal and believe it would irrevocably change our North Irvington neighborhood for the worse. And that's the one that had, I believe, 70 signatures, something like that. So,
Okay, Brian, I just, so I'll redo this to add the thing about no impacts on emergency services. And then I wanted to ask the board about one other thing that was triggered, I think, by the letter that the Riverview people sent about trees not coming down. And there's the section on the site plan standards that said the area is supposed to be respected, the greatest extent possible, and about the stone wall shouldn't be removed. I think we might want to add something also there about mature trees should be preserved to the greatest extent possible, something like that. Because I went back to look, I thought that was would be in the site plan regs, and it's not actually. Surprisingly. Even though the planning board does it all, the planning board is really rigorous about it, but I guess you could have a different planning board. So I would just suggest we add that. Again, I don't think it's sort of changed.
Is that going into the planning, which part of it, is that going into?
Go in this section, there's a section on,
for this zoning district?
Additional requirements for special permits. The planning board shall require that no special permit shall be issued until it's satisfied that the proposed use will not have a visual impact on the character of Broadway, including but not limited to the following. Stone wall should not be removed to modify existing buildings, but it wouldn't just relate to Broadway. But the trees should be preserved, mature trees should be preserved. The greatest extent practical. I mean, because obviously some may have to come down.
Well, that's what I was going to point out. The only thing is that in a lot of cases, unfortunately, mature trees show, conceivably, depending on what kind of environment they've been growing in, can show, a lot of wear and tear over the years. Sometimes, as you've seen, the planning board typically gets a inventory of trees, right? And some trees, even if they are mature, are really marked as high hazard and need to be removed but replaced.
Yeah,
okay. I'm just putting that.
Make it 2 for 1.
Okay, so,
excellent. So we're continuing.
You got to put in 2 new ones.
That's light.
More.
We're done with this.
Yes, we're done with that.
Next.
We're next on to the secret review of electric vehicle charging stations project. Claire, do you want to just quick update on this?
Yeah, so
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
We're not talking about it this is really a check it out.
I got to tell you what I did.
Entitlements tonight, did any of them
Goodbye. Hey, goodbye. We gotta do our next thing.
I will ask you.
Go or be quiet. Go.
Hang on, John. Nobody congratulations. You should have ended the meeting after she spoke.
You should have. Just drop the gavel.
She should have dropped the mic, that's right.
Oxygen. Okay,
So,
item 9.
so in the course of pursuing a electric vehicle charging station at the Aqueduct, that charging station is actually located on land that is owned by the state. So they have a permit that's required to be able to build that. The permit has already been largely approved.
All right, can you move your microphone a tiny bit up so that it's right into your...
Thank you for your time. If you could make more of these available to people, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Because now they've run out.
Oh.
It's very rare.
It's very rare, right.
So the charging stations that are located in the Aqueduct parking lot are actually on New York State Parks land. A permit's required for it, and part of the permit requirements is to evaluate the environmental impact of installing the charging station, which is literally, you know, a 2-foot by 3-foot concrete pad, you know, and the associated electrical work that's being done. So it is an unlisted action under SEQA. Mary Ann's prepared and has attached the EAF. Provided you have no questions about it, there's a resolution to be considered.
So does it go on the parking lot part?
It's just off the pavement, but it's just behind a guardrail, but it's New York State property. I mean, even the parking lot's New York State property. We lease
Yes,
it.
that part I knew. I just
We
wondered
lease it,
if
yeah.
the actual 2x3
It's just behind the guardrail.
behind the guardrail, so the grassy.
It's not grass.
Behind the guardrail?
Trust me, it's not
Oh, wait,
grass.
all right, you're
Next to
right.
Croton
I'll ask you
Place.
later. I'm trying to, it's
I'll
not
meet you
to
out
the
there
south.
tomorrow.
It's not to the south of the parking lot, it's to
No,
the,
it's to the west,
to the west
in the southwest corner.
parking lot. Okay, got it.
Happy to meet you out there.
I got it now.
Okay.
In that corner.
Yes.
Of the garden, okay.
So it's been determined that there'll be no negative environmental impacts. I assume you'll agree?
Yes.
So they're ready to approve it?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to
Okay.
approve this seeker
Yes.
ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the Board of Trustees has proposed the installation of electric vehicle charging stations, and whereas the project is unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and whereas the Board of Trustees has reviewed the environmental assessment form related to the said project and has determined that it will have no negative environmental impacts, now therefore be it resolved that negative declaration under secret be issued. And I signed this one, Larry, if you want that.
Yes, thank you.
Resignation from the planning board.
Well, you gotta vote,
Oh,
yep.
sorry. I'll take a motion, get a second. All in favor? Aye. Resignation from the planning board, resolved to accept with regret the resignation of Hillary Levy from the planning board effective February 14th, 2020. Thank you, Hillary. I'll make a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
We already talked, we have sufficient backup for this now, or?
We have 2 alternates,
So we're
so,
gonna be looking for another alternate, or?
well, yeah, and we have to consider what to do in terms of their status as alternates, right? To be determined, things are happening quickly, so we'll give it a little bit of time.
Authorization of a tax certiorari settlement. Whereas petition having filed by the Holy Spirit Association for Unification of World Christianity, challenging real property tax assessments on the town of Greenberg's 2019 assessment roll with respect to the subject parcels. It's 50 East Sunnyside Lane, the year 2019. Whereas petitioner actions are now pending in the Supreme Court of Westchester County. Whereas the town and petitioner have reached a mutually agreeable resolution. Now therefore, the office of the village attorney is authorized to effectuate a settlement commensurate with the following terms. Original assessment was $13,645,400. Proposed settlement is exempt. The original assessment was $2,093,900. Proposed settlement is exempt. Refund $0 because they have been paying us anyway, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah, it will affect our budget projection now.
It will.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
Affect our budget that we're working on right now, there's no refund due, but we were using that assessment roll, and now they've been granted an exemption, so our roll will be lower.
Oh.
By 15 million.
That's a big one.
Correct?
Or 16 million, or 15 and a half.
Yes.
Right. That's right.
Wow.
To be discussed as part of the budget
Be
process.
discussed, right.
Yeah. It's not
It's not earth.
it's not earth shattering, but we'll discuss it.
They
We have
were,
to
I
get
think
up
they
3
have
hundred.
no rules.
They had been exempt, and then it was taken away in the 19 roll, that they petitioned it, and it was reinstated.
Right.
Award contract of 2020-04.
Is there a vote? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. I keep trying to move. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Award of contract 2020-04 for the Madison Park Playground renovation project.
Okay.
Is there a little explanation there, Larry?
Sure, just a brief explanation, but the resolution is pretty self-explanatory. So, we did receive a total of 7 bids for this, this important project. The low bidder, after the bids were evaluated and reviewed by our village engineer, it was determined that they did not meet the bid qualifications in that they didn't provide an adequate number of references, and it's all, spelled out in this resolution. So as a result, we are recommending that the bid be awarded to the second low bidder, J.C. Land and Site Development.
Questions? Whereas 7 bids were received for contract 2020-04 for Madison Park Playground renovation project as follows. 1, DLG Contracting LLC for $795,745.80. J.C. Land and Site Development Inc. for $811,906.60. Turftech USA for $990,030. Tony Caselli Inc. $1,002,000. Geocorp Contracting $1,119,004.50. Contact Construction Technology Inc. for $1,383,071. Palladino Concrete Creations Corp. for $1,486,449.80. Whereas the village engineer researched the qualifications of the lowest bidder and determined that DLG Contracting LLC did not meet the bid qualifications to provide an adequate number of project references of similar character and magnitude, I recommended that the contract not be awarded to DLG Contracting LLC. And whereas the village's engineer reviewed the qualifications of the second low bidder, J.C. Land and Site Development Inc., determined that their bid is in order and responsive to the specifications, and whereas in accordance with the village's comprehensive purchasing policies and procedures, the village administrator undertook the appropriate due diligence and determined that J.C. Land and Site Development Inc. is financially viable. Now therefore be it resolved to award contract 2020-04 for the Madison Park Playground renovation project in the amount of $811,906.60, base bid plus alternate, to J.C. Land and Site Development in Boston, New York, and authorize the village administrator to execute said contract. I will make the motion if I have a second. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Joe, you have anything you want to say? I'm very happy, I'm very grateful, and Larry and Doug Hahn and John Imbiano did a great job.
And Marianne.
You made the right choice tonight.
And Marianne.
And Marianne, so very important. So we're very excited, I'm going to schedule the meeting right now.
You go break ground? Yeah. Thanks, guys.
I don't need to stay.
No.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be.
I'll find it right home.
Somebody make sure.
Yeah, we'll
Make it walk.
Next up is the budget workshop for fire, DPW, and water sewer. I think we're gonna start with fire.
Yes, we will.
Okay. It's great that your budget presentation usually takes about 15 minutes.
Yeah, we might have to increase it now, just based on the last conversation.
Just the overtime?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, over that,
Yes, we do. It's under, public safety.
yeah.
Just send me something.
I think that's my favorite thing is that bag is from, I think it's my Mustachio Bashio bag. It comes out every,
Comes in everybody's.
it's the best. That'll be my legacy and everything. Public safety?
Public safety. It's under
Yeah.
public safety.
Then I'll get there on time.
And then
So,
All in one degree.
Yes, sir.
no requested increases?
No increases this year.
How do you justify that?
Okay, good.
We are watching the budget like a hawk. I've implemented a few things on our side just to make sure that, we're maintaining the existing budget. I think once we get to the Capitol, we'll have to have a conversation based on, some of the gear that we need to replace and air packs and maintenance on the rigs. But as of right now, everything that we've been doing with the apparatus and maintaining them seems to be in line with projections. We did have a little
potentially a little slight overage with the ladder, but given the year that the ladder, I think 97, if I'm not mistaken, you know, there's a little more work that needs to be done, but for the most part, it wasn't over, you know, excessive, if you will. So, I mean, anything else that you guys are looking for? I mean, honestly, you know, as you can tell, we want to run as lean as humanly possible. You know, we've asked to, you know, cut costs if we can, given everything that we need to staff and inspect and maintenance and everything. There's not much that we can do from a wiggle room perspective. But, you know, obviously we work with you to try and make adjustments if necessary.
I think the only recommendation I'll make is that maybe we have you come in, maybe with the other chiefs, to a work session.
Absolutely.
Just so you can talk about the department a little bit. Maybe we have some people here, because I think that's, to me, we don't get to talk to you. It's kind of like Jim. We don't get to talk to him very much at public meetings anyway. And I think it's unfortunate we don't get to highlight you guys. So why don't we work on a date that you guys can come in? It doesn't have to be budget night when it's 9, 10. And there's everyone here, Greg and Jim, who don't care.
Next public hearing in North
So, you know, I think that's the only thing to me that's unfortunate about your budget at 9 o'clock after a big meeting night is that we don't get to hear from you guys. So maybe we can, if you were to flyer and schedule a night that's good for you guys, maybe during a slow period or something.
I would very much like to have that session.
Yeah, just, I mean, to talk about
It's a good way
training
to
and
talk, and it's not a good time
needs,
now. so-
how things are evolving, what anticipated needs you might need, you know, all those things.
And I guess my question is, do we start a discussion about kind of refreshing the building plans at this point? Because there's going to be a lead time to get that thing through the hopper, so we know what, you know, capital cost projections might be, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question there will be a significant amount of time devoted towards coming up with planning for the use of the property across the street. We haven't closed on it yet, so we're not starting those meetings, but we are in contract. But certainly, you know, there are a lot of factors that need to be considered, and the fire department, I know, you know, they're certainly highlighted in all of this, but you know, we have other facility needs as well, and all of that has to be discussed in great detail. So, and at public meetings, it's not a secret, but we just need to talk about it. But anyway, so that'll be it. That'll be starting, but hard to predict exactly when. I'm sure over the coming months. The only question I had for the chief, I'm sorry, is simply that the equipment budget, which is pretty significant in your department, and it should be, you typically spent a little more than what the budget is from what it looks like in past history. So the question is, do you feel comfortable, and I'm sure Brendan questioned you on this, but do you feel comfortable that the $31,000 budget this year is adequate, or are there any particular purchases that you're concerned won't fit within that? And if the answer is yes, you're comfortable with it, that's probably what they want to hear, but...
No, I mean, it's a very good question. I would say we are comfortable at this point, just based on the fact that if there are other line items that we typically don't deplete, we'll just push that over to the equipment if we have a need. I think from a capital budget perspective, we do need to look at air packs. We do need to look at getting new gear, because the 10-year rule is coming up for some of our gear. Seems like it was just yesterday, to be honest with you, but you know, we do have to talk about that. I mean, the air packs are the biggest thing that I'm worried about in the next coming few years. I mean, not worried, but it's a big expense. So those are some of the things that we'll have to take a look at.
And there's a grant that just opened up now, Assistance of Firefighters Grant, which we can discuss a little bit about. Is any of this stuff is applicable?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for hanging out. Unless you're going to complain about the North Broadway zoning, because I know you have to drive through there.
There's still time to make your comment if you'd like.
We
Go back in a second.
We will table that.
Thank you. Chief, thank you for your stewardship of the department.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thank everybody for us. I look forward, yeah, definitely set up that meeting, come in and brag about yourself.
Okay.
Greg?
Great.
Next.
evening.
Good evening. DPW, we found that one. We found that one.
By the way, Greg, thank you again for your department's excellent job of keeping the streets clear in the wintertime. You know, we say it all the time, but you know, when you cross
That's
over,
what we do.
when you cross over into Irvington, you know you've crossed over. It's kind of an alternate reality when it comes to snow and ice on the streets. And I mean that in a good way, of course.
So, so obviously, Public Works, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, includes a number of different departments. It's not just highway, it's sanitation, recycling, and street trees and street lights. There's a few different departments that it covers, so.
Police phones.
Well, no, not really. So, that's a leftover from the other night. So,
Okay. I was wondering about that.
No, it's because it's under the telephone line?
Falls, yeah, the town hall actually falls underneath
The department,
umbrella.
yeah.
With the building itself, and so that's one of the costs, so it's, yeah. It's an anomaly.
Craig gets it on the weekends.
He's not responsible for it, so. For that part. Anyway, so the summary page, Brenda, I don't know if you want to go through any of it, but the summary page, similar to the police department that we did the other night, Brenda has summarized the various changes in each of the individual sub-departments of the DPW, resulting in an increase of $169,000. Brenda, if you want to go through that, or?
I think
Greg,
I'll do a few things, and then I'll let Greg take over on his proposals for the department. The large one is to accelerate the reoccurring paving to offset the bonding. So the paving, we have proposed here, $60,000. We were going to originally do it an increase of $30,000, and then $30,000 next year. But because we originally had a very favorable position going into the budget, we have in here $60,000. So I think once we see all the departmental requests and we see how that exemption rate that we just was reinstated affects the budget, at the next meeting, I'll have an overview of all the things we've gathered and put it into some kind of a framework to see where we are with a tax levy and a tax rate.
Would the 60,000 get us to where we want to be, or just?
That would be the end, unless, I mean, Greg always likes more money to pay with, but that would be the end of this plan.
Right, so I remember we were doing 30,000 a year for 5 years, was it?
Or 4 years.
4 years.
So we, the line item that we're talking about here is the ongoing capital work. So in this particular instance, we're talking about paving, but there's also a base $130,000 that we've had for many years that addresses, any capital items, sidewalks and curbs and you name it, drainage, that type of work on an annual basis, if you want to borrow for that. We then, 2 years ago, started adding an additional $30,000 specifically for paving. And we're 2 years into that. We have another 2 years left, and we're proposing to accelerate that and get up to an additional $120,000 for paving in total, which will then complement the $130,000 of other capital work for a total of $250,000. The reality is, it's not a magic formula. If he doesn't have $120,000 of paving in a particular year, but has an enormous amount of drainage work, it'll be drainage work that's done. But, those proportions historically would seem to work. Anyway, that's what that
makes sense.
So as Larry said, it would give a total of $250,000 for paving, annual maintenance, curbs, drainage, paving, and then plus we have the CHIPS money on top of that as well.
Not so much this year.
From the state.
From the state.
I don't understand the part that says to offset bonding.
Well, we were bonding in the past and borrowing for it.
Okay.
But because we want to do it every year, instead of borrowing every year, we're building it into the operating budget.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant, but I didn't understand those words. Okay.
Those are our rules, yeah.
Your lingo, got it.
Let me see if there's anything else of interest on here. I think, well, you can see where the increases reflect the the prior year increases that we're giving. So they're given after the budget is adopted, is transferred from contingency, but in the next budget year, you have to build it in. So you see the ones that are required, and they're required for staffing, such as for step increases. Those are union contractual. So you can see on street maintenance, current staffing, salary steps, that's a required one. Those people are currently making it or will be making it in the next fiscal year, those particular steps, and we need to fund for it.
So the other large number looks like it's more additional part-time help?
Yes. Well, it's two things. I requested a raise for our part-time help. We haven't had a raise 4 or 5 years. At least, yeah. At least, could even be longer. So I requested a raise from 17 an hour to 20 an hour for these guys. They're doing a great job. And also, it's a little complicated. During the economic slowdown 10 years ago or whatever, we lost 10 full-time employees, which we did supplement with these part-time people. But as time is going on, our responsibilities are getting more and more. And we're asking for additional funds, not only to give raises to the guys, but additional funds to use people as needed. It's been difficult lately. We had to change the way we pick up yard waste, because we used to pick up yard waste Monday on the north side, Tuesday on the south side of the village. 2 or 3 years ago, because of the volume of the yard waste, we have to give ourselves 2 days to do it now. So we pick up yard waste Monday and Tuesday on the north side. The residents are only allowed to put it out on Monday because we don't go back over what we already did. And Thursday and Friday on the south side. But with that, the impact of that was Monday and Tuesday were the yard waste days, and Thursday and Friday were the highway days. So we had to take our highway people and use them for yard waste. And that's why we need additional people. Not all the time, but we do need additional help. That's part of the reason. Plus all the additional responsibilities that have been slowly added on over the years.
Watering.
Oh, yes, thank you, Larry.
That's an example. Right.
Also, we watering the trees on Main Street. We did recently plant, in the last 2 years, we planted 19 trees on Main Street and then installed 19 tree wells. And there's 2 more going in this year, and the plan is to put in 2 a year until they're all done, which is going to take a while.
Unless we get another grant, I guess, right? Is there a delay before we can apply again, or is it only offered so many years?
Yeah, I mean, that pot of money was associated with the bridge project, so
it's gone.
It's an existing, yeah, so.
Another 50 years, we got it again. Hopefully this one lasts longer.
Don't even say it. There's other opportunities though besides the bridge, and you know, it's just a matter of identifying the opportunities and applying. But in the meantime, we're going to try to work at it diligently.
So we're talking about each tree well is about $6,000 installed. Is that how what it's come out to be?
Something like that, yeah. That's about right. And also, I should also point out that I've been working with the beautification committee, obviously Joe as well, on participating at least to some degree in the joint bid that the villages do every year for providing annuals, baskets, flowers for the downtown. And so in addition to the regular window box plantings and other plantings that the beautification committee does, we'd also like to start deploying some of the sidewalk pots in various locations. The hanging baskets don't really work in our downtown because of where the poles are, and they kind of get blended into the poles. But the sidewalk pots could work, and so we're looking at, making an initial investment in that to deploy them for the summer. But of course, they need to be watered, so that's more work.
Probably more frequently than a tree.
Right, exactly.
So the other thing, what about the notion of, I know there was a discussion, I don't think it happened, but replacing some of the window boxes or all of them? Was that anything that Joe brought forward to you?
I mean, that was a concern a few years ago. I don't know where they are on that at this point.
That's what I don't know where they are.
Their concern was getting things watered, and we've reassured them that we have a plan for being able to water. We may have to expand.
No, I'm not talking about water, I'm talking about the actual state of the boxes. There were a number of boxes that were just...
We purchased the equipment to be able to expand.
And to be able to water. But
Water.
Mark's talking about the replacement of the actual...
The boxes that are falling apart. Yeah, I don't know where that stood. Would you speak to him
I
about
think
that?
that's a good thing to keep in mind, I agree.
Because they have they're wood, so they have a certain lifespan. Just
Some
like
of them
the-
are
Just like the
on the
containers.
ground, and some of them are gone.
Yep.
I had a question about the idea of the planters, which, I think that's nice, and I'm sorry we can't do hanging, because that is a nice thing to do, but I don't know if it's me or somebody else, but some input to have some sense that the choice of these actually fits with the overall look and plan, with the look of the tree wells and the look of the benches, and they should be right for the beautification people so that they're practical and work.
Yes.
But in terms of the choices, I'm not the
So you want
be-all,
to-
end-all, but some input onto that.
Are they whiskey barrels or
overall
are they
look.
metal frame?
No, they're pots. I'll pull out the latest information that was sent to me.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I was going to ask Greg, do you also do the watering, or is it someone else, of the Veterans Plaza? Do you do the watering of that area, or is that another?
We've been using those guys in landscaping.
Okay, okay.
Taking care of that, and they're
Okay.
doing a good job of it.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll be using native plants.
Natives, that's
I don't think the annuals are necessarily native. I couldn't tell you what they are, but the beautification committee uses a pretty limited palette of stuff every year. I don't know that they're native though.
They definitely are not.
Probably not, yeah.
Most annuals.
They're only annuals, so if you don't like them, they'll be dead in a year.
Well, actually,
right in there.
Typically, they'll be dead in about 6 months. because they're
September, and they'll be.
Exactly. Anyway.
So I had a couple of quick questions. Do we expect that the new chargers, when they go in, are they going to be, hopefully not this year, but are they going to be requiring a maintenance? We don't have any experience with them, right? I mean,
There's a maintenance contract.
oh, that comes from like
It's a. Are you talking about servicing them out in the field? I'm not sure what do you mean?
yes. I'm talking about the unit, the charging units themselves are hardware.
Right.
And they could conceivably go south, and I don't know what level of support we need for that.
Right. I'll check. I know that there's definitely service included. I'm not sure exactly what it covers.
Yeah, but it's not something necessarily that DPW would be involved in. It
I
would be-
wouldn't expect that, no.
Yeah, okay. So then, what is the status, because I don't see it here, and this might be something that is in the capital budget, but where are we with the purchase of recycling bins and trash cans? Have we gotten all the locations we expected
Yes.
with those, the ones out in front of Jordan? So they're
Yeah, pairs that are, the ones you see out there are was it 4 or 5 locations?
Good. Right.
5? I think 5 locations that were put out.
Okay, so we're not, because I didn't see anything in here, but would that have been in capital, or would that have been out of the top?
They're not that expensive.
Yeah, so What's your experience with them? Are they working fairly well in terms of separation?
The trash cans, nothing really changed.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, except for the opportunity to put stuff somewhere else.
A little bit less trash because the bottles and cans don't weigh much. They are, you know, but they do get filled. Approximately once a week, those cans get filled in the summer, not in the winter.
But do you see much mix in them, or is they pretty good in terms of what people are putting in them?
They do throw some paper in there, some contaminations, but I don't, not enough to throw in the garbage so far. They've been pretty good. The guys have been able to recycle.
Yeah.
So.
Because I know, looking at a couple of them, I saw some that people were just sticking some paper in it. It's like,
right now, we
what the
just
heck?
pick it up once a week, basically.
Yeah.
We were hoping for more than that, and maybe next summer, or next spring, this spring coming, with more exposure, people know they're there. We're hoping we have to pick it up more than once a week.
I thought at one point we were talking about actually getting, or the GPTF was talking about having some additional public education. Maybe that's something that we need to bring up with them.
Yeah, sure.
So the final question I had was about at some point you're going to be gone from the role.
You too.
Somebody we're all gonna be gone.
He's retired, he comes back.
So what I'm trying to ask
Santa,
is,
every year Santa comes.
I'm sorry, because I have to, what I'm trying to say is, I don't know what the discussion was about if, you know, someone to come in as superintendent, are they typically come from outside the municipality, or are they raised up from lower ranks?
I think we have, I think
that's
the village of Irvington is very extremely lucky that when I do go in a year.
I'm not pushing.
A year.
You're retired once, what do you
We have a
want?
very capable guy all ready to step right in, and he's sitting right behind me.
All right. So now you're gonna ask Jim that question.
So my question is really kind of, I'm looking at, because I get a lot of comments from certain residents, but I'm concerned about that we do have good training for, in terms of kind of a broad training for when your replacement comes in, that is looking at a lot of issues that deal with you know, municipal sustainability and stuff like that, which, as you know, in the DPW world is its own universe. So I'm just wondering if Jim is actually going to be the designated victim, then if there's some additional training that maybe needs to be offered to him.
Can I answer that?
I'll let you answer.
So first of all, it was not my intention to talk about personnel decisions at a public meeting. That's the first thing. Second thing, however, is that succession planning in any of our departments, as you know, is a very important function. We take it very seriously, and you, as a board, take it very seriously. When it comes time to need to replace any of your department heads, including DPW, you will be making the decision on who that person is. So you will have the requirements laid out for what you expect of your new DPW superintendent. That's simple as that. It's not any more complicated than that. I mean,
Well, where do those requirements come from? I guess that's what I'm...
They're your requirements.
Us.
It's not a civil service requirement. Those are tests, and the person that gets put in the position has to take a test. The test, they probably won't cover the practical things that you're worried about, or you're worried about, you know what I mean? So, but you still are responsible for hiring someone with the skills that you're looking for.
Got it.
That's all. So, he's not going anywhere anytime soon, so you have lots of time to think about what those questions are.
He can't, isn't he still a provisional
Just
employee?
one thing on your original question.
Which was
I
original.
think that a person that's already here in-house or has worked in the village, knows the village, because a big part of my job is interaction with the residents. I mean, at this point, I almost know where everybody lives, their address.
You know more than anybody.
You know, you bring somebody in from out, and, you know, they have to learn all this stuff. So, I mean, it's a big part of the job that a person that's already here, already doing a good job, and knowing the same people that, you know, knowing the same residents.
Well, again, the whole thing I was trying to get to really, and I didn't know, maybe backed into it wrong, was I'm just interested in trying to be sure we're getting a broad vision built into, you know, what DPW was looking at and going forward. You know, we've talked about this before, new technologies, you know, coming forward, new opportunities, and in the case of, I mean, one that I would never expected to have seen come forward so quickly, you know, household kitchen waste, you know, which seems to have a life of its own, but I wouldn't have expected it to become something that might, you know, be running in a pilot from, or larger than a pilot, I don't know what, from Greenberg. So, anyways.
You know, thinking maybe this is something we can talk about, maybe an executive session.
Oh,
You know, I mean, hopefully you're not going anywhere anytime soon, but I think coming up with other requirements that I think, or I think you have to take a step back from that. If we look at potential training that we hear about, I'm sure Jim would love to get more training. So I think that's an important thing to figure out.
Well, that's why I was asking about what the monies were, because I saw $350 in training, and that seemed, I don't know if that was only for one area of DPW, that just seemed potentially a little low.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could also, if we find a great project this year, the equivalent of like the FBI Academy for DPW.
In the superintendent's school.
We could find, I think we could probably find a contingency, and then we can always add it going forward.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next.
Okay, sorry to push you out the door too soon.
So anyway, so just to recap, the whole increase is about 169,000, but I also wanted to point out within that is we're increasing the overtime for snow removal. We're
saw that,
analyzing
yeah.
it. Even though it wasn't a severe year, the expenses were still there because they had to go out for the
Ice, yes.
and everything else, so I thought it was.
It snows more in March, so that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
That's true.
So be
And
ready.
who knows what's to come?
Be forewarned.
Winter's not over. Right. Okay, we got it.
Tonight as we.
Thank you, Greg. Straight home now. I get early tomorrow.
It's a long walk.
That was fun.
That was fun. Come back anytime. Remember you used to have to come to every meeting? Those were good.
Next.
I'm the one who said, why do they have to come and sit at that meeting?
The chief and the DPW chief.
Yeah.
Jim,
I missed that, yeah.
Good evening.
Talk to us about the North Broadway zoning district.
does Jim have his own tab?
Yes, water.
Oh, he
They have
does.
their own budget.
Oh, yeah. So we have first the water fund, and then that's followed by the sewer fund.
Thanks, Greg.
So, I'll tee up a couple of things. Obviously, Jim's always a wealth of information, but from a financial standpoint, the projection for this year is that we'll be in the positive for the year. The number is on the order of $120,000 thereabouts.
That's correct.
Yeah. That's what the projection is. So that would move our fund balance from 94,000, which is that kind of that minimal number that you established last year when you made those year-end transfers to eliminate the deficit in the water fund. We established a small, very small surplus. That would rise to almost 220,000 as a result of the activity this year. So
I'm sorry, I was drifting off. Which activity caused it to rise?
The operations of the fund, what we're projecting is a surplus of about $120,000, which would flow to the bottom line and raise your overall fund balance up to about $220,000.
So this is water revenue effectively.
Yeah.
The water revenue is projected really within 4% of our target, which is really quite remarkable.
Yeah.
We have our billings through February, and the rest of it are projected based on last year's revenues. So,
So overall, everything seems like it's in pretty good balance. The revenues, as Brenda said, came in, close to where we expected. They were a little bit low, but that's okay, because then the water expenses, the purchase water from the Front-Road Pump Station are also low. So, everything's kind of in that balance zone, at least that's the way it seems to us at these numbers. So, basically, what we've projected here are, we've made certain assumptions about the cost of, the raw cost of water from New York City.
The excess charge, you mean?
The excess charge and also.
And the base charge,
Base cost of the water. So, we won't know those numbers until they release, decide on new rates later in the spring, probably, in advance of July 1st, which is when the rates change.
I confirm they're not available yet.
Not available,
As of this
right.
week, it's still not
So I
available.
think we're assuming on the order of 5%, about 5% increase.
Last year was 8% on the regular, was pretty high last year.
But not that big on the excess
The
rate.
excess.
So we kind of blended it and looked at 5% as a conservative number. That doesn't mean 5% to our residents. That's what the cost, the raw,
It's like
the
one of the
wholesale cost of the
inputs, yeah.
water is. That's one of the inputs. So another area that I just want to cover debt service program. I'm trying to cover the things that aren't really Jim's wheelhouse.
Exactly.
You know.
Well, the debt service is up by 25,000. I didn't break out the ban, versus the regular permanent financing. But there was quite a number of projects that were taken on in the water department, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of the, well, Jim, you go into those, but they were.
Well, the one I wrote that the mayor mentioned during the meeting, absolutely. So that's an example.
Good water talk tonight.
Oh,
Valves, we know
So we
about
have
the
an
valves
increase
there, and that, you can see on the, I just want to point out the salary line, one line is up, one line is down, so they're offsetting each other. It was the matter of the allocation of what line they belonged in. So there's, I guess, a net increase of about 13,000 for salaries, between those two lines.
And those are just contractual increases or staff increases?
Correct. Right.
So it's not, there's no new staff being hired or anything like that?
Water administration is down. Did someone leave, or?
No, it's down because you see the other line is
Yes.
37 up. We had, it was an allocation and the way they were presented in the budget, they really belong this way.
Okay.
So it's just.
Same number of people just being allocated differently,
Yeah.
that's all.
What is water program hosting?
That's our new Logix program that we installed about a year ago,
Water billing.
water billing program,
Okay.
and then the online capability.
Oh, hosting, you mean because it's
It's
cloud-based?
It's a cloud-based.
I thought we were having people come here.
Exactly.
Water.
You know, that little pump house on Station Road.
Waterside chats.
Our annual, it's gonna be our annual.
I saw those champagne affairs over there.
Sparkling cider.
Oh, yeah, okay, good, sounds good.
So we're recommending a 1.57% increase in water rates.
Right, that's what flows down to the bottom.
That's what the bottom line is.
Flows down. That's the sewer fund.
All right.
It's a business.
I'm only asking for an increase in supplies, 5,000, and professional fees, 10, because costs go up, supplies costs go up. So we've been pretty much on it, I think for the past 8 years, we haven't asked for any increase in both of those lines, but it's getting to the point where we need it.
So with all these, what about your contractor line? I mean,
That's the professional services line. It's 8340437.
so that's like Bucci helping you dig up
Right,
a hole?
right.
Yeah, we looked at, we looked at past history on that, and again, you can't determine ahead of time what it's gonna be, but you can try to look at trends and see where it's at. So, you know, we're pushing the upper limit of that budget this year. We may go over a little bit. Obviously, we could go way over if we have major problems between now and June 1st, or we could stay just under if we have no problems, but.
We're pretty lucky this year as far as water main breaks, but we've installed 6 brand new fire hydrants.
In the past, you've talked about thinking about aging infrastructure, you know, trying to get ahead of it. I know that the pressure relief stuff down for Bridge Street was a dangerous thing, but, and some of it, I remember you talked about not knowing where stuff was, even in the street, you know, like, the records aren't all there for everything.
We're working on that.
Yeah. I was just trying to get an update, like how you come.
Like for example, the break that we had at the bottom of, where the train station was. We went around, we were shutting all these valves, couldn't find them, couldn't find the one to shut it. And it wasn't actually down by the train station, it was actually up the street in front of the dentist's office. So I remember doing a water main break there like 10 years ago, and an actual old employee called me and said, hey, what about that valve up by the dentist's office? So we went up and shut it, and that shut it off. So after that, so now every time we have a water main break, we do drawings and document what valves did what size valves they are, how many turns, if they're broken, if they need to be replaced. So we're doing some of that. Of course, across the tracks, we're looking to do a capital project of the water main down there. So in the meantime, I went to the end of, just before the park, where it was breaking, and we put a valve in there, so if there is another issue down there, we're not gonna affect Bridge Street, Empty Cabarina, or...
Was it just past, it was just past the
just
building?
past the edge of the building, the last building on Bridge Street.
And it was, between that and Scenic Hudson.
Yeah, because that's where we had, pretty much from that corner of the building towards south is where we had all the breaks.
Yeah.
Because that's the very end of the system, that's a dead end. So whenever you have a pressure spike or something happens, that's where it breaks. So we put a valve, hopefully far enough in front of it, to where if we do have a problem, we don't have to shut down all of that stretch there in the businesses.
We can better isolate it.
Right.
Yeah, is that, I mean, what do you do to, without getting into it too deeply, what do you do to try to adjust the pressure?
Well, we have...
Popping the end of the balloon, so to speak.
Well, we had the low service transfer tank, which we just upgraded, put a brand new pressure reducing valve in there to augment the tank, because there's a low service. We take high pressure water, it goes into a tank, there's a float which feeds all of Main Street, you know, the low service part of town. So that's been upgraded. The pressure reducing valves on Station Road and the one on Ardsley West were upgraded, and I had them come in and do maintenance, and we adjusted them to make sure they were properly adjusted now. So, you know, there's different things. You gotta maintain those valves. You know, the low service transfer tank helped big time getting that replaced. Plus we're not losing water into the reservoir anymore because it's not backing up and going through the pipe into the reservoir, which gave us a lot of excess bills at one point in time.
Actually, that was happening prior to Jim taking over in the water department, and that was one of the first major fixes that he had.
Right.
It was very costly, as you can imagine, and wasteful.
And I'm assuming the valves at the reservoir are working just fine, because I see Barney Brook flowing and not flowing depending on the weather.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 plug valves in there, and they're automated, but we use different ones. You know, like one time we'll go up there, open up the first one, then we'll open up the second and the third to make sure they're always being used and maintained. So it works very well. It's all by eye. I mean, we look up, every day we do rounds, we go around, inspect the dam, look at the water level, and then determine whether we want to, you know, and then also look at the weather to see, make sure there's no rain coming, you know, when we're opening it. And then after the rain stops, then we look and readjust. So it's been working out very well.
So a couple of things I just wanted to point out that, you know, Jim was heavily involved in the Hudson View Park culvert. Not that building a culvert is his specialty, but there was a tremendous amount of utility work and rock excavation, which I know you've heard about, that was involved, and Jim was there, you know, daily, multiple times a day at times. There's a lot of work going on there. Jim also, not that this is a referendum on him, but it's something that's related to his work, not even in his department. He's been largely responsible for overseeing the reconstruction and renovation work in front of the Halsey Pond Dam.
I was gonna ask
So
about
all of
that.
that work was with his oversight. I mean, obviously, Parks employees are there, and they have maintenance responsibilities on an ongoing basis, but, really the interface with the contractor and getting things designed and built the way they are, and working with the engineers was on his back, which is great. He took it on willingly, so,
Where do we stand with New York State as far as that's concerned?
So, New York State is requiring us to make what's called an auxiliary spillway. It'll be to the south edge.
Yes.
I don't know what direction it is.
It'll be the south.
South edge of the dam. They're working on the design right now. The New York State is aware that we're working on it, so everything's in good shape. It's proceeding.
You haven't missed any deadlines that they've been published?
No, I mean, they were anxious for us to adopt and finalize the emergency action plan that we have, and that's been done. We still have a couple of agencies we have to meet with to kind of go over the plan, make sure everyone's aware of how it works, if something were to happen, what the notification procedures are, all of that. But the New York State's been reported to on all of this, so they're well aware.
We're talking about Halsey Dam.
Halsey, yeah. I mean, the same applies for Reservoir, except there's no work that we're designing right now. We're just maintaining it like usual.
We have to put a siphon in there to be able to lower it within 14 days down to 10%, so they're working on that too.
For Halsey Pond.
For Halsey Pond.
Yeah. We don't have to do anything special for the
Technically,
reservoir.
if you have the siphon there, you'll never have to use the auxiliary spillway, but that's in case of catastrophic disaster.
Yeah.
Our free,
You have to keep something taking.
well, Jim, thanks. Similar to the fire department, maybe when we get closer to the capital budget, maybe have you come in and just talk about some of the projects. 'Cause,
Absolutely.
That would be great.
I think that, again, at 10 of 10, I know you have a long ride home too. I think it's just, we don't want to cut you short, so why don't we just put you on the calendar sometime this spring to talk about, upcoming projects, maybe some of the past projects that, that we're doing.
New ideas?
Yeah, new ideas, exactly.
And I just want to say, I had a question about my water bill that Jim was very helpful with, and I appreciate if you treat the other residents like you
I've gotten
treated
that
me.
comment
I was,
many times.
Very happy with that.
They don't always like his correct explanation, but they always like his explanation. I've gotten a call, Friday night, someone really irate that their bill was $1 billion, whatever. And I say, oh, you should really talk to Jim Englishby. He's been here 3 times. He was very helpful, but my bill's still. Yeah, so. But,
Sometimes they don't have the answer.
But you can't put the water back.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Jim.
everything and the budget. I mean, to have a surplus now in the water seems like a bit like a dream, but it's great. A lot of it's
Everybody gets a
hard
free
for me.
bottle of
Yeah,
water.
on the way out. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm afraid I'm fading away with my, I go
Yes,
to
have a great night.
You too. Stay home.
See you later.
Sorry, you get about 4 hours of sleep, you get back, right?
Yeah, that's all
I
right.
have to.
Once a year.
So I could probably pass on the rest of the agenda, assuming unless there's something specific.
Does anyone have anything they want to report?
No.
No.
I don't want to.
There's no public comment?
I do have a bunch of action items. I mean, fire department would be brought in,
Yeah.
follow up on the window box question, and follow up on the maintenance for the EV equipment, and now to bring in Jim as well. Sorry, Vic. That's it.
Great. I'll make a motion to adjourn if Connie give me a second.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm so sorry, I just realized.